Thank you for the download, for the stream, hopefully for the subscription to Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast. If you're not already subscribed, make sure that you hit that button, whether you're listening on Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, YouTube, Google Play, however you listen to podcasts, go into that app, hit the subscribe button, and you can make sure that each and every Thursday morning for free, you get the newest episode of Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast. You're also going to get bonus shows whenever bonus shows drop, and the only way you're going to do it is if you hit subscribe. You get them before everybody else. Also, leave us a 5-star review and a rating over on iTunes. It really, really helps the show, and it's going to bring us in to 2018 the way we should be going into 2018. And how should we be going into 2018? With a brand new episode of Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast. Let's get started.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast. Introducing your host from New York, here is Sam Roberts.
You know, we've been doing this show for over 3 years now, which is unbelievable to me that for over 3 years we've been doing Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast. And this has been our intro from the beginning. And I think to myself, should I switch it up? Should I get a new intro? But how are you ever going to beat Howard Finkel? How are you ever going to beat Howard Finkel introducing your show? So I think we're keeping it for now. And for the foreseeable. I don't see us ever changing it. Welcome to the last Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast of 2017. It's been a mighty fine year in the world of wrestling. It's been a mighty fine year in the world of wrestling podcasts. I got a bunch of tweets from you guys about who some of your favorite interviews were in 2017. And it wasn't all wrestlers. Not just the wrestlers getting love, but guys like Ron Funches getting a lot of love. Guys like, a lot of you guys like the Miz interview. So many tweets coming in, and I really always appreciate that. Make sure they keep coming in at NotSam. You can also, we're switching up the format a little bit of the state of wrestling and going into the top 5 stories of the week. So if you want to contribute to that, make sure that you do so on Facebook. If you go to facebook.com/NotSam, you'll get to all the information there. We have our video interview with Jim Ross, good old JR. It's up on the YouTube page, youtube.com/NotSam. And last week's interview with Bobby Roode will be there soon, if it's not already by the time you're listening to this. Entire interview over at youtube.com/NotSam. Not just the audio, but the full video and everything that we got behind the scenes at the Westchester County Center. And there was maybe one person, maybe two. It was a very small number of people listening to that interview heard the Rusev interruption. Midway through the Bobby Roode interview, just heard somebody go, "I'm all the way up." And Bobby Roode did say Rusev. It was Rusev walking behind us and disturbing the peace. So if you didn't get to hear any of last week's podcast, make sure that you download it and wait and with bated breath, because before the new year comes, the video interview with Bobby Roode will be up on YouTube. A lot to talk about, actually, this week in the state of wrestling. We got live wrestling for the first time during a holiday week, so we do have some stuff to break down, and we will get there. But first, I wanted to go through, it's an atypical week. There was no way that I was going to take the week off the podcast. Number one, because I've never done that. But number two, because if the WWE is doing SmackDown and Raw live on Christmas, and then the day after Christmas, and then live on New Year's Day and the day after New Year's, I don't see how any of us podcasters have the right to call it in. To say, hey, it's a holiday week, I'm taking off. No, you're not. Because wrestling isn't taking off, so we're not taking off. A lot to dissect in the state of wrestling, because it wasn't just a traditional holiday episode where they kind of phoned it in. You know, there have been holiday episodes. Like, you remember that episode where, like, the week before Christmas, Alberto Del Rio turned face, and then Christmas week, he ran over Santa with a car, and then the week after Christmas, he was back to being a good guy, and it was like, what, did we just chalk up the fact that that's happening on a holiday week to just being like, well, it's holiday Raw, who's watching? This week, we did not feel that way. We had a legitimate episode of Raw. We'll talk about that and the whole premise of having the guys work on Christmas. That's a very controversial and heated topic. I heard about that a lot on Twitter this week. But before we get there, instead of doing the typical interview, we're going to go through what is, I believe, become a tradition in the world of Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast. We are going to spend the last podcast of 2017 kind of going over the year that was, especially in WWE, because it's been a very interesting year. You know, when you think about 2017, at first, I don't know what exactly jumps out at you. I'd be interested to hear what you guys think if you want to tweet me or send me a message on Facebook. What jumps out to you as sort of the thing that 2017 was for WWE or pro wrestling in general? But I got Wade Keller on the line to talk to him about what 2017 was, because he's one of my favorite people to break down this entire business that we know as wrestling with. So Wade Keller now joins me in our interview segment this week as we do an extended interview and break down everything that was 2017 in the world of professional wrestling.
And now, the Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast interview.
So, you know, I mean, if you've been listening to the podcast long enough, you know that what I like to do towards the end of the year, the last podcast of the year, is to break down the year in wrestling with a trusted cohort. And I thought of nobody more trusted and more of a cohort than from the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Podcast, Wade Keller. So, Wade, what's the haps, man?
Doing great. How you doing?
I'm great. As holidays are good. This time of year is good.
Yes, it's always a strange week in between Christmas and New Year's. I'm not quite sure. Are we in a routine? Are we out of a routine? Should I be doing something different? Should I be doing the same thing? So I'm kind of in my normal Tuesday routine, and glad to be sitting here talking to you.
Well, you know, it's I guess it's the same thing with WWE World, that there is no specific policy on what WWE does for holiday weeks. I remember this was several years ago, not 15 years ago, but several years ago. It was you know, probably 6 or 7 years ago. I was at Madison Square Garden at the Holiday House Show. I don't know if it might have been the 23rd that year. It was something like that. It's not always the day after Christmas, but I remember having a conversation. I think I went with my wife because I remember having a conversation with her and saying that, you know, it's really interesting because they pre-tape shows here and there. And for the first time in I don't know how long, after this house show, the guys have like 13 days off, which is 1 year they did that. And this year we get to this thing that's actually become far more controversial amongst fans than I thought it would. I guess that's just the internet for you. But the idea that not only is there not 13 days off, but we actually have live shows on Christmas Day and on New Year's Day for what WWE said was the first time ever. What did you think of it? I'm sure you watched.
Oh, yeah. Yep. I watched live and got it covered on my podcast. So no days off for me either.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also for guys like us, I hate to interrupt you, but for guys like us, like if you were going to take the week off of your wrestling podcast, it's like WWE's not taking the week off and you are. I don't think so.
No. And I don't, and I don't feel bad about it. I mean, I had my eye on the NFL game on Monday night because the Philadelphia Eagles game had big ramifications on my Minnesota Vikings chances of home field advantage throughout the playoffs. So I'm watching that, and there's the NFL crew and all the journalists covering the game, and then my Minnesota Timberwolves played the Lakers on national television TNT, and there's the whole crew, Charles Barkley and company, working a holiday. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, it's just when you're part of entertainment or cover entertainment, there isn't a typical schedule. And right. I don't think it's that big of a deal in and of itself that wrestlers were asked to work Christmas. I think the larger deal would have been if they didn't have any extended in quote marks, extended time off, either leading into it or coming out of it. And at least they didn't work a schedule in the days leading up to Christmas, even though they have a really busy week this week. So all in all, I really don't think it's a big deal. I mean, for some wrestlers on a personal level, it might be. I just say, kind of in a generic sense, I'm not in an uproar over it. Yeah,
I kind of have the same opinion as you. That from my perspective, strictly as a fan, I don't see any moral reason why, you know, like I'm able to just enjoy the show, and I was really actually psyched that there was a live Raw long, you know, Christmas Day. It was great. It was family, but it was exhausting. And just knowing that I could sit down on the couch and watch Raw, I was like, you know, this is actually pretty cool. This is a fun way to end the night. So I definitely wasn't one of these people averse to it. But I thought the same thing as you, and I don't know if it's getting publicized enough, that the guys did have last week. They didn't do house shows after SmackDown. So there was an extended period, and people could kind of change around. And for a lot of people, they were allowed to get to the show later on Monday, which meant that there were many people who did get to spend Christmas morning with their families and then fly into Chicago, right after that. And to be where we're at now, like let's also keep in mind that we all romanticize the Ric Flair NWA period of time in the 80s when it wasn't a matter of, oh, what do you mean we're not going to be home for Christmas? It was never home for Christmas, never home for Thanksgiving, never home for any holidays. So this idea that wrestlers get holidays off is kind of within the last 20 years, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I grew up, my earliest memories as a wrestling fan are sitting around with my family after Thanksgiving, begging them to go to the St. Paul Civic Center to go to the AWA show because Thanksgiving night was the biggest show of the year. Starrcade, Thanksgiving night.
Right.
I remember Christmas Star Wars with the AWA in different territories. Thanksgiving and Christmas have historically been big nights for professional wrestling, and then it changed, and now this is not WWE greedily running their hands back and forth together, going, let's make extra money. It's happenstance. Christmas fell on Monday this year, and WWE is a live show in a competitive TV market, and USA Network doesn't want to give up a rating up against the NFL and NBA. They don't want to completely throw in the white towel with a best of show. So it's not like this was some overt strategic decision. It's a roughly once every 7-year dilemma. And I know leap year screws that up a little bit, and I can't do that math right now. Mm-hmm. But a roughly once every 7-year dilemma that occurs. And yeah, I thought it was. I thought they didn't overdo it on the Christmas stuff, but there was just enough of it to give people who maybe were sitting around with their family who don't normally watch wrestling a chance to follow along with what was happening and laugh a little bit. I think the biggest story, as far as the Christmas thing goes, is John Cena was there.
Yeah.
And I thought John Cena sent a message to the locker room. I'm a big deal. And, not that he would say those words, but I'm the biggest star in this company. I'm on a part-time schedule. I could have said no to this, and I didn't. I want to be here to support the brand. I want to be here to make people watching with their families on Christmas feel like this isn't a show that's just being phoned in. And if John Cena shows up on Christmas when he doesn't have to, it does take away some of the leverage for other guys to complain too much.
Yeah, and I had a similar conversation yesterday talking about John Cena and really thinking that it does take away the leverage of complaining, but at the same time, I think that it is somewhat of a morale booster, I would hope, for some of the guys, because you've got a John Cena who is a movie star, right? He's got a couple of movies that just came out. He's got a whole bunch more coming out, and it's still this mentality of we are working Christmas. We are together, and it's nice to see him that way. But before we get in over our heads with all this current day stuff, because we could easily do that for the next 7 hours, right now, how do you feel about the WWE in 2017? I mean, I think that this was definitely an interesting year for a lot of different reasons, and we'll get into all of them. But what's your takeaway as you sit there and you go, okay, year's coming to an end, and you start kind of juggling, because it all happens so fast that we don't really realize how much happens in a year. What do you think 2017 was in the context of WWE and pro wrestling in general, I should say?
Yeah, well, I would say for WWE, I feel like it's a year that was absent of a major game-changing moment. We didn't have a launch of a network. We didn't have an initiation of a roster split. We didn't have a changing of the guard. I mean, I guess maybe John Cena firmly becoming a part-time wrestler is significant, but it happened at the same time that we had the unexpected rise of Braun Strowman to become a significant centerpiece attraction. So, to me, when I think of 2017, I don't think it's going to go down for WWE as anything but kind of a business as usual year. They didn't. I think from a business standpoint, there were no major turning points. We look at year ago ratings compared from 2016 compared to 2017. No major story there. We look at WWE Network subscriptions. Yeah, went up a little bit. enough to not seem like a disaster, but not so much that it seemed like they struck gold and found a magic formula. So, I mean, a lot happened in terms of, hey, there were 52 weeks of programming and all these pay-per-views and big moments. But on a business side, I'm trying to think of what the biggest kind of business is, when we're 10 years from now and we look back at the year, what'll it be remembered for? And unless Undertaker's final match does historically turn out to be WrestleMania earlier this year, I'm not sure what that moment is going to be.
It's interesting because we don't know. It's going to help. The context of history is going to help us. We could be looking at 2017. The biggest moment of 2017 could be what happened a couple of days ago when Vince McMahon sold $100 million of stock.
Yeah.
Because that could be, like, is this football thing, is this all rumor so that Vince can sell $100 million worth of stock? Or is he really going to start another football league or something like that? Like, I think that 2017 almost becomes the precursor to whatever they've got in store for first quarter 2018. And when I say they, I probably more mean Vince McMahon, because I think the company, like you said, it was a good year in the sense that it wasn't a bad year. Everything's rolling along, everything's moving fairly smoothly, but there is that thing that we find out about, in the last weeks of 2017, that Vince McMahon now has freed up $100 million of personal money so that he can go outside of the WWE and start this new thing.
And it's just so soon in that story. We don't know. You're right. Is this a sign of Vince having more money than he knows what to do with? Is this an accountant saying, hey, this is probably better for you? And Vince's like, oh, okay, well, or someone just comes to Vince and says, hey, here's an idea. I watched that 30 for 30, and maybe there's something we want to do with this opportunity. I mean, it could be so many things, and we haven't eliminated them yet. It doesn't mean Vince McMahon is getting a little bored with WWE. The network is doing its thing. The roster split's doing its thing. He's got other people working on the next TV deal. It's going to be what it's going to be, and it sort of feels out of his hands. Is Vince kind of bored and wants a new challenge? Maybe that's what's going on here. And then if he pulls himself away from WWE creative, and I wouldn't say that there's reason to believe he will, but this kind of news sparks that conversation, and justifiably so. If he were to move away from creative at all to engage in this product, who would fill in? Probably Triple H. Well, from watching NXT and what we know about Triple H, could that be good for 2018? Could that lead to some changes for the better for WWE creative? So I don't. Yeah, I mean, it is such a current story. It's not really something we can reflect on yet or know the impact of, but it's a top story to keep our eye on headed into 2018 for sure.
So how about pro wrestling in general? For me, I think 2017, great strides were taken in this idea of there probably no time soon, if ever, will there be an international competitor on the level of WWE, meaning there's not going to be another organization ever. We're never going to see another WCW versus WWE. Like, that's just that dynamic may be gone from wrestling forever. And I mean, you might feel differently, but I think that the pro wrestling industry as a whole, especially in 2017, and it has a lot to do with the Bullet Club and New Japan, the Young Bucks, Cody Rhodes, Pro Wrestling Tees as an organization. Like, I think that the idea of pro wrestling becoming this truly independent entity, and that the real competition is keeping guys happy in an organization like WWE, because there are options outside of WWE. It would just depend on the work ethic of the individual. I think that really showed itself in 2017, that the pro wrestling landscape and the competition that exists outside of WWE is the potential for each individual person on their own.
Yes, I think the idea that in the landscape, because I've been doing this so long.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to step back and look down at the business from not up close of what's happening day to day, and not compare it to 6 months ago or last year, or even 2 years ago, but really put yourself 5 years ago and 12 years ago and look at where things were from a wrestler's perspective. And it's again, following wrestling as long as we have, the way wrestlers look at the industry changes with each generation of wrestlers who comes up. Mm-hmm. And I experience that differently depending on how long I've been watching wrestling contemporaneously in real time versus just looking back historically at it. And I think wrestlers today are veteran wrestlers in the indie scene and in WWE have grown up with a post-competitive, a post-alternative to WWE, like on a large scale. I mean, when WCW went out of business, there are like people in high school, you know, who were in diapers the last time WWF had real competition on a national serious level. It was that long ago. So there's wrestlers who have been active for 5 years or longer who never remember anything except WWE, being as synonymous with pro wrestling as the NBA is with pro basketball. Yes, there's some other developmental leagues, but it is just this is what it is. But I would say in the last couple of years, and there's an ebb and flow, and it's sort of abstract, and sometimes people are immersed in it. I think sometimes think it's bigger than it is to the average mainstream WWE fan. But that all said, undeniably, I think from a wrestler's perspective, they look around today compared to, say, 5 years ago and say, there's more places if I am entrepreneurial and really good at what I do. If I have a following, there is a place that I can go. There's places I can go and piece together a good living without being beholden to WWE. Now, is it 50 people? Maybe there's 50 indie guys making good money, you know, like not just okay money, but good money. But it's not so huge that it's just like thriving where the roster, the total income being made by the top 50 indie guys isn't anywhere close to the 50 people on WWE's main roster. We're not there yet, but it would be an interesting estimate to make to not New Japan full-time guys, but other than that, you know, list all the guys, and including Ring of Honor, because it's just a small handful of guys making good money there, but there are some. It is something to kind of step back and look at and go, wait, what is the state of the industry? Indie doesn't mean the same thing today that it did 5 or 12 years ago. And part of that is it took a while, and the internet has helped, but there is this whole other world out there, and we're seeing wrestlers explore it, and Austin Aries and Neville and obviously Cody, what Kenny Omega has done to make a name for himself. It's that aspect of 2017 is fascinating, and it's one of the bigger things to watch, not just next year, but I would say it's probably a 3-year story to watch at this point.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because I think it reflects on the entertainment industry as a whole, that there are kids in high school right now that they can either, if they want to be the host of a show, for example, I want to host my own show when I get older, they can look at Jimmy Fallon and say, okay, how do I get to host the Tonight Show? Or they can look at Joe Rogan and say, wait, you don't have to have a network at all. You can just figure it out this other way. And I think that's the same thing that's going on in wrestling. Like, I'm sure that there are young kids now that are getting into this, that are training. Maybe they've even been in the business for a year or two. Most probably still want to host the Tonight Show and probably want to be Jimmy Fallon. But there are some that are saying to themselves, I don't need to ever go to WWE because there are these other models that I can now follow that have been kind of put out in front of me. And I think in 2017 is when those paths that guys like the Bucks and Cody Rhodes were carving, those paths became a path that you can actually follow. The path became clear enough that you can actually follow it. Really, for a young person, for the first time this year, I think.
I agree. I think that the idea of having a voice as a kid in whatever you can start your own podcast, you can start your own YouTube channel. Kids today, like pre-adolescent kids today, dream of hosting a YouTube show when they're 12. They don't dream of hosting a network show when they're 40. You know, like it's different, and they see, you know, shows go viral with people who are just like them. Right. And so I do think that translates to wrestling. I think there's indie wrestlers out there who are studying from a young age, whether they're pro wrestlers yet or not, or just dreaming of it. They study what are wrestlers doing to market themselves. I mean, Chris Jericho is the largest version of it. Is he the most successful true free agent wrestler ever? I mean, I would have to think that through and kind of define the term a little better, but he's got his own podcast, independent of WWE. He works for WWE when they want to and he wants to, but he's working New Japan. I think Jericho announcing the match against Omega at Wrestle Kingdom is one of the top 10 stories of the year. I think that
definitely
that was a moment that kind of shook Now, again, I think on another year, it might not make the top 10. I don't want to make more out of it than I should. I think this was a down year in terms of just this definitive, wow, course-changing top 10 stories of the year. But it'd be at least lower on the top 10. But it's one of the bigger stories of the year, and it is and Jericho is on another planet because he's the biggest legacy era star, other than maybe Triple H, not legacy era, Monday Night War era star. He's the biggest legacy star who had main event matches in the Monday Night War era, who's still active and can still go, other than maybe Triple H. And so anything he does is big news in that sense because there's so few of them left. But I think other wrestlers look at him and go, wow, if I'm good at what I do, like really good at what I do, I have my own podcast, I build my own social network, I gain credibility in other worlds, and I can carve my own path and become a big star. So that, again, we don't know. This is an interesting year because it could be the year where it sprouted some stories that we didn't know what they meant yet. And 2 years from now, 2017 could seem like a bigger year than it does sitting here the last week of the year.
Well, let's talk about 2017 for Chris Jericho a little bit, because I think he's one of the big, not just the fact that he's going to New Japan, but just his story in 2017 is one of the biggest stories and best things to reflect on. Because when you think about it, 2016 for Jericho was not bad by any stretch, but I think in 2016, especially in the first half of it, if not the first 3/4 of it, it was sort of, okay, everybody's happy to see familiar Chris Jericho again. And the stuff he did with AJ at that WrestleMania was like, okay, but I think a lot of people were let down that he won the match. And even going all the way through to SummerSlam of 2016, when he teamed with Kevin Owens, it wasn't this like, oh, cool, it's the Kevin and Chris show. It was, oh, I guess it's just two guys that they had nothing to do with, and they put him in there with Enzo and Cass. That's how it felt at SummerSlam. So coming out of 2016 and into 2017 is when you really started to have this movement again in the career of Chris Jericho, which I think a lot of people didn't expect it, not because Chris Jericho is not good, but because he's at the phase in his career that he's supposed to be in, right? This is supposed to be the swan song of it, and it doesn't appear to be close. So he starts doing his Kevin Owens stuff as they head towards the Royal Rumble. Leading to WrestleMania, of course, they have this segment, the Festival of Friendship segment, which, to have a long interview segment in 2017, they have tried to replicate the success directly and indirectly of This Is Your Life Rock so many times, especially in recent years, and almost all of them have failed miserably. I mean, think of all the sort of long-form live comedy bit things that they did, and you can take really funny guys. I mean, you bring in the Good Brothers, you bring in Anderson and Gallows, who are legitimately funny, entertaining guys, and they die slow deaths when they're in a position to do these sort of long-form comedy skits in the ring for whatever reason. But the Festival of Friendship happens, and I think that segment cemented that this was arguably the best work of Chris Jericho's career. It was the first time that anybody talked about a run that could be better than the run he had with Shawn Michaels, was the Kevin Owens thing. And while by the time they got to WrestleMania, the Festival of Friendship was probably the peak of that story as opposed to the WrestleMania match, which, you wish that it could have been the other way, but that's fine because everything leading up to it was so good. But, and he leaves shortly after that, right? He has the run of his career, arguably, in WWE. He leaves for a couple months, he goes and does his own thing, and then in a slow news year, he kind of shocks the wrestling world by announcing he's doing Wrestle Kingdom. And even though that's 2018, within the same 365-day period, he's got a big match at WrestleMania with Kevin Owens, and then he's got what is arguably the main event for Wrestle Kingdom with Omega. It's Wrestle Kingdom and WrestleMania, the same 365 days, not a throwaway match, a legitimate high-profile match with a legitimate, thought-out story behind it. I mean, it's pretty incredible when you think of Chris Jericho in 2017.
It is. I mean, I would not have thought at this stage of Jericho's career that he'd be doing this. I talked with Lance Storm about this on my podcast last week. Because he teamed with Jericho back in the early 90s in Jim Cornette's regional wrestling startup, Smoky Mountain Wrestling, as the Thrill Seekers. And back then, I mean, both Storm and Jericho looked like they'd be, potential future stars, but that was before the height barrier was broken or changed. You looked at them, you're like, all right, they're good sized guys, but probably going to be tag wrestlers or, junior heavyweight, cruiserweight style wrestlers. And Jericho, when you look at the path, and I was talking to Lance about Jericho's at the core, did he seem like somebody who would be able to reinvent? Reinvent's overstating it, but to reinvent himself for longevity and to stay current enough and to stay cool. When you think about Jericho's promos on Nitro and then his debut on Raw and then the journey in WWE, you think about how far back that is. We're almost 2 decades in, and he's still cool to those fans, and he's cool to a whole new generation of fans who look at the 1990s like we look at, the 60s, right. This other world way long ago, and he's still appealing to them. It's a remarkable story that he's been able to do it. And again, I keep saying this, it won't fully sink in probably until he clearly has retired, when he can really reflect on things. But what he did with Omega in the Angle in Fukuoka, and then at the press conference, in the way that he portrayed himself, and the way he carried himself, the way he reinvents his looks, in his appearance, fans are just buying in every single time. I don't know. He's had a couple moments, I guess, along the way. Let's not, maybe we want to forget him where certain things didn't quite work in terms of a new look or a catchphrase or something like that he tried.
And it's funny too, because when we do revisionist history, and I think if you listen to Jericho, sometimes he'll come at you and say well, that thing that didn't work, it wasn't supposed to work because it was leading to this, and you go, okay, Chris, okay.
Yeah, Chris is not shy about self-aggrandizing his success. And hey, you know what? Having that kind of confidence in yourself is, even if it goes 10% further than it maybe should sometimes, is often a key to success, because people who have that moment of insecurity and doubt themselves, sometimes that can take them off the course of just pushing through with the next good idea. And Jericho doesn't lack confidence in that way. And people sense it. People like winners and people like people with confidence. And he's a hard worker. And and he just has that X factor that some people do not have.
And he's also... He's not afraid, right? He's got the balls to change these things up, because it's not just a matter of he comes up with all these great ideas that he can change up, or he's got all these great looks. Most guys who establish themselves in one way, whether it's I'm Y2J, I'm the Ayatollah of rock and roll, I'm whatever it is. Jericho has had multiple successful incarnations. To take that and then turn it on its head and do something completely different is a risky thing in the wrestling business. And I think especially with guys that are Jericho's age, they were raised in the time in a business where if you had something good going, you stuck with it, right? And to see Jericho take more of a younger approach to it. And Jericho is acting like a guy who's got nothing but time in front of him. And I think that is ultimately one of his greatest strengths.
That he operates as if it's not coming to an end? Is that kind of what you're saying?
That he's acting like he's got nothing but time, meaning it's not coming to an end anytime soon, and he's not afraid to try. A young guy is not afraid to try new things because they can always reinvent themselves. Sure. An older guy doesn't have time to reinvent themselves. So if they've got something that works, they're going to stick with it till the bitter end because they know how tough it is. Jericho doesn't look at it like that. Jericho seems to look at it in a way that, okay, well, I've made this work. If this doesn't work, I'll do something else after that, which is kind of remarkable.
Yeah, I think there's something in our hardwiring as human beings that is resistant
right.
to change at a certain point in your journey. And it's risk aversion, it's comfort level, it's a sense of entitlement. Hey, I worked hard, I was successful, I put in my time, and now you owe it to me to revere me. And Jericho doesn't have that. Jericho, and great, there's people who have reinvented themselves and it has not worked out.
Right.
Matt Hardy reinvented himself. It's worked out. But there's other examples of wrestlers changing things up. The Jim Herd forced haircut on Ric Flair didn't work out so well. I mean, so it can't just be a decision to change. You have to be aware of what change is going to work, and you have to stay current not only with the industry that you're in, but the fan base that you're appealing to. And Jericho has his finger on the pulse of that.
The Hardys, they were my next people, I guess, to bring up, in the sense that it's a similar story when you talk about reinvention and when you talk about guys having a run that you would never have expected them to have. And I think people, when they look at what 2017 was for the Hardys, you did have a bit of a dead middle, right? Like you know, after the WrestleMania glow wore off and before we got into this Matt Hardy is woken, there was this period of time where you were going, oh, maybe what are we doing with the Hardys here? But I think that is going to ultimately be erased because it was a period of it was short and things are working themselves out. But I think that because in the month or two leading to their WWE return, people did see it coming in the sense that Broken Matt was the most over thing in wrestling. So, of course, WWE would want something to do with that once their contracts ran out. If you take it out of that context, if you step back, like we're talking about stepping back, Broken Matt aside, the Hardys' return at WrestleMania, the Hardys getting that standing ovation in a stadium full of people chanting delete, like that is one of those things that as a fan you think will never happen. And no matter how much time was like dead space for the Hardy Boys this year, I don't think any of that takes away from the moment that they got at WrestleMania in Orlando this year.
I put up on my website, pwtorch.com, and mentioned on my podcast too, a call to the readers and listeners to send in their top 5 personal wrestling moments of the year. And almost every list sent in had Hardy's returning. Some had it number 1. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting to me. I mean, and part of it is, you know, what demographic am I hitting and how do they look at the Hardys? And there is a nostalgia for them that goes back to a certain point in the Monday Night War era and that time frame. And then you have Broken Matt. And again, we talk about reinventing and taking advantage of the internet, carving out your own path on the internet with YouTube and through social media. I remember Matt Hardy was the first person that I remember attaching the word brand to his name on Twitter. And I was like, well, that's kind of weird. Matt Hardy brand, aren't you a person? And now it's just a norm. It's just part of the vernacular. Like I use the term a lot now, you know, the what is your brand? And Matt was ahead on that. And
right.
he's been one of those people like Chris Jericho who has been thinking in that way ahead of the curve. And so the Hardys returning as a nostalgia act was huge because, I mean, Matt had reinvented himself and made himself relevant again. And people, I think, respected what he did with that character. And it was just fun. And I think an underrated aspect of pro wrestling, and it's something that I think is one of the real last keys to Roman Reigns if they keep him babyface getting over. It's a joy. It's expressing a joy, the emotion of joy while doing your job. And having fans think that you're excited to show up for work and not just clocking in. And when Matt did what he did, there was a real sense of joy to being a pro wrestler. Like, this is going to be so fun. It's so creative. And Jeff was kind of along for the ride, but also having fun. And so when they showed up, I think fans didn't look at them as a nostalgia act, but the return of a relevant act. But they were waiting for that moment.
Right.
For Woken Matt, Broken Matt, and that whole universe to come back. And so it was exciting on two levels. Fans who didn't know about Broken Matt or peripherally paid attention, they're just, the Hardys are back. This is great. And let's not forget, Jeff Hardy at one point was the co-lead babyface with John Cena.
Yeah.
And if not for all his out of the ring issues, I mean, he could have been the, you know, we talk about Shawn and Bret, or we talk about, you know, Hulk and Flair and different Austin and Rock. It could have been Jeff Hardy and John Cena had Jeff, you know, kept his head on straight during those key prime years. So Jeff coming back is a big deal too, even though Matt kind of rose in prominence. So yeah, I mean, it's that in and of itself is a fun story. And again, it's one of those stories now hitting its stride late in the year.
Yeah.
And it might end up being a bigger story in 2018 than even it was this current year.
Well, I tell you that it finally feels like a Bray Wyatt story fits Bray Wyatt. I just, you know, Bray, one of my favorite wrestlers, one of my favorite characters in WWE, or I should say one of the characters that I feel like has the most potential in WWE, because I think that there is, and you look at the success of NXT, you look at the success of a character like Broken Matt, you look at the success, at the end of the day, the Young Bucks, for instance, are hugely successful because the characters that they play feel like real life. Like, and I know that you'd say, well, that's because they're just being themselves, but they're not. They're being the Young Bucks. They are playing a role. Right, exactly. And I think that Bray Wyatt, Wyndham Rotunda, has the ability to make you believe that he is actually Bray Wyatt. And that Bray Wyatt is a real tangible thing, not some like spooky, scary movie monster thing that, John Cena can make funny faces at and make look ridiculous, but an actual living, breathing thing that we can relate to. I think Wyndham Rotunda has the ability to do that. I don't think that it's happened in many years. I think it was a little bit there years and years ago, but in many years it hasn't been there. And 2017 was just not a great year for Bray Wyatt. I was happy to see him with the WWE Championship for a little bit. That was when did he win? Was that 2017?
He defended it against Randy Orton at Mania.
Yes, of course.
And
yeah.
Was that just a
and
not a high point.
That's the problem. That he defended the day. I remembered the Randy Orton match, but I didn't remember that it was even the WWE Championship match, because it was not. And I feel like most of what's happened since WrestleMania has just been a miss. The WrestleMania match universally, I think, was a miss, and people didn't understand the holograms in the ring, and it was just throwing. It's like when you have a cake and you already have sprinkles on it, but now there's cherries on it too, and now there's chocolate chips, and you don't need to use all the toppings, right? Just one, and you'll be amazed at how great it is. And then the House of Horrors match was universally looked at as like kind of cheese and just did not work at all. And then, he goes over to Raw, and he's kind of lost on Raw a little bit. He's nothing much, and the lead up, I cannot believe that we were leading up to a Bray Wyatt. We were leading up to the reveal of Sister Abigail behind a Finn Balor Bray Wyatt match, which was going to involve the Demon and Bray Wyatt and Sister Abigail and Finn Balor. And if I told me that in 2016 that's what 2017 had, I would be excited. I bet you would be too. But I mean, when you think about that was the one match that didn't happen this year, and everybody is either relieved or forgot that it ever existed. Like that, like the fact that match not happening is a relief to all of us. Mm-hmm. Really tells you something unfortunate about what's going on with the Bray Wyatt character.
And I think it was a hangover from what Randy Orton walked over on the ramp to WrestleMania, the projected imagery.
Yeah.
And WWE taking the creative license that wrestling fans institutionally are willing to not endure, but accept. There's a certain latitude that wrestling fans give, and it's hard to put. You have to kind of just grow up watching wrestling. It's one of the problems with WWE writers showing up who are peripheral fans, and then they say, "Oh, this has never been done before. Let's try this." And it's like, well, there's a reason that wasn't done before,
right?
And it's not that in a whole other genre that might not work, but pro wrestling is its own genre. It's like peripherally following comic books and then walking in and deciding to, wouldn't it be great if we did a double turn with Superman and Lex Luthor? Whatever. It's like, no, you can't do that.
Can't.
Culturally, there's this glacier-like cultural set of mores that changes very slowly, and there's a structure that you have to follow. And when you do what you do with Randy and Bray, what they tried to do, it jars people out of that flexibility that can only stretch so far with the narrative structure of the show that they watch. And Bray and Randy pushed it, and then I think people with a hangover from that were fearful of what this was going to mean. Are the writers pulling Finn Balor into the same place that Bray Wyatt has been pulled into and that Randy Orton was pulled into. So I do think there was more fear than anticipation for that, in part because I think WWE fans lost their trust that WWE creative would do that well.
You know, it's really interesting, and we talk about, and I agree with you on that, and we talk about that match not happening, and of course, the Mumps story. I think, honestly, if you talk about the big stories of the year, if the Jericho going to New Japan story is one of the top 5 stories of the year, I think the Mumps story is absolutely one of the top 5 stories of the year. That these big names on the roster come down with mumps right before a pay-per-view, and last-minute changes have to be made to create dream matches, I think is a big story. And I think a couple of things coming off of that mumps thing. I don't know if this is just, I don't know. At the time, it's what I felt, and I still feel that way. I think that AJ Styles became a star in the eyes of the WWE. I think most of us knew that he was the best performer in WWE before that, but I think that in the eyes of the WWE, his match with Finn Balor and then the match that he had on Raw after that pay-per-view, I think it changed. Not that there was a negative perception of AJ Styles, but I think AJ was just AJ and he was over there on SmackDown. And I think after those 2 matches wrestling on the Raw side, that the WWE and Vince McMahon kind of realized that he is a massive star. And I think that so I think that I'll get to the other thing once I get your feedback on that. But I think to me that was the moment that the WWE decided AJ is one of the guys.
I think it's when the more casual fans and WWE brass caught on to what the fans 12 months, the more ardent fans, the ones who are listening to shows like ours, knew a year ago or
Correct.
felt a year ago.
Yeah.
And the idea that AJ Styles was not champion all year is, I think, there's a sense of loss that WWE fans, especially those who watch SmackDown, or maybe especially those who don't but would have, feel that there was a loss. AJ entered the year as champ, lost at the Rumble to John Cena, and I think that was a mistake. I think 2017, the number 1 story of the year, should be not us piecing together what you just did about when AJ finally caught on. It should have been something that Vince McMahon saw ahead of time and went with. And AJ should have beat Cena at the Royal Rumble. He should have been the champion going into WrestleMania. We should not have had this Bray Wyatt, Randy Orton thing. We should not have had the Jinder Mahal thing. I mean, just the WWE, the year the WWE Championship had, in and of itself, it's a little more abstract, but that's a top 10 story of the year.
I think that's a great point.
Yeah, so to me, 2018 is a chance to fix what went wrong and got derailed in 2017 with AJ. And yes, I mean, going back to the story with the mumps and how that shook things up. And now here we are, the week Dean Ambrose news comes out that he's going to miss most of 2018. That changes things. That changes things for Roman Reigns, who was benefiting from that on-air chemistry. It changes things from Seth, who now goes from a tag wrestler with Dean, with some Shield reunions anticipated and probably in the works, to now with a new partner, which may mean he's in a tag team for a long time, or it goes singles sooner than planned. And then, of course, it hurts Dean. And it affects Jason Jordan, who I just mentioned in a way. Like, one thing, like the mumps changed the course of Bray Wyatt and Finn Balor, and to a degree the Shield and Kurt Angle.
Yeah.
And now we have a Dean Ambrose injury changing the course of Seth and Jason Jordan, and perhaps hindering something that was intangible but working for Roman, which was having the Shield to hang out with. So, I think you're right about the mumps story. And I'm talking about 2 things at once here, but then the AJ story, let's just get it right. Just line people up. And that's what's scary is, what is next? What is set up for AJ in 2018 in the current roster? That's what's I'm a little nervous about if WWE, when focusing on Roman Reigns and others, and thinks, well, AJ just takes care of himself. You need to line up good opponents and plant those seeds 3-4 months ahead. And I just don't see any seeds coming to. I don't see anybody sprouting into a dream match opponent for AJ with the storyline support for it at this point. So I hope one of the lessons of 2017 is put more attention on preparing the year for AJ to shine.
Well, and when you look at AJ, I would hope that the feeling is, like, he is so good, just imagine how good he'll be with a story. Like, there's no way a story's going to make him worse. So imagine we can actually make him even better. Let's do that, because when you really talk about the year of the WWE Championship, the title itself was almost cursed by a decision that in hindsight was probably not great. Well, I don't think was great, which is what you just said, John Cena beating AJ. And it's for a couple reasons. Number one, it made fans go like, well, we kind of liked AJ. I didn't want to see that. And number two, the fact that John only had it for a month and lost it to Bray a month later made it seem very odd. And I still don't think anybody can truly place why John Cena winning the title for the 16th time, that was what everybody was waiting for, 16-time world champion, why that was barely acknowledged and then kind of brushed over, and he lost it a month later. And from that point on, until we get to the end of the year when AJ wins the title back, you had a terrible run for Bray Wyatt, and you had a run for Jinder Mahal, which really makes me feel for Jinder, because the title run was not a good WWE title run. The WWE title picture was bad. The fact that the Randy Orton and Jinder Mahal stuff where Jinder just cheated every single pay-per-view, like, it got so repetitive, and that's not the fault of Randy or Jinder. It was just in the storytelling. The Nakamura stuff made Nakamura look worse because he was supposed to be the guy that could, be the guy. And then finally you give it to AJ. And to me, the most unfortunate thing about all that is, yes, it negatively affected Randy Orton and Nakamura. I don't think Randy Orton's affected anymore. I think Nakamura is still washing that off. But I think it negatively affected what should be described as a banner year for Jinder Mahal. I think Jinder has improved so much. And you talk about a guy who's hardworking. You talk about a guy who's put in time to getting better on all levels, and has the right attitude and has the right, like, Jinder Mahal, had he been made United States champion after the Superstar shakeup and had a run with the U.S. title, I think we'd be talking completely differently about Jinder Mahal if you had a bad guy Jinder Mahal sneakily keeping the United States title and a good guy AJ Styles keeping the WWE Championship for an entire year. I think you've got a completely different outlook on SmackDown.
The lack of building that foundation of Jinder is a serious act. I mean, getting eliminated by Mojo Rawley at WrestleMania, hanging out with Rusev, was not enough to prepare fans for what management felt about Jinder, which is, hey, we might have something here. And it absolutely is a case where Jinder was a victim of poor planning. I mean, he's not, he probably has something to complain about. I mean, it's hard to complain when you get a push that, 95% of the locker room is jealous of, and opportunities that they're jealous of. He got opportunities, and it took him a little while to step up on the microphone and feel comfortable in that kind of spotlight. But had they made fans feel like they had discovered something before management, which I think is one of the key tricks that promoters use and is a key to success, is make it feel like it's the fans' idea, and or that at least fans felt they saw it coming because somebody earned it. And I think when Jinder got the push that he got, people weren't looking at, oh yeah, you know what, let's give this guy a fresh look. He is better than we remember, or than we perceived, and he deserves more. Instead, people were just taken aback by, well, wait, how could this guy get this push? Oh, it's all about his physique. It's because he's tall and he's ripped. And he's just that stereotype, as JBL would say, if you built a sports entertainer from the ground up, he'd look like this guy. We'd say that about Randy, but I think fans felt like, oh, this is just Vince McMahon pushing somebody who checks off his boxes. And it was unfair to Jinder, because if Jinder had kind of more organically had an opportunity for 4, 5, 6 months, it's what I talk about building up opponents for AJ. So fans spend months anticipating something before it happens. Had they done that with Jinder as a heel, but you can still accomplish it, make people think this guy is on his way up. There's NFL teams where it's not their year to win the Super Bowl, but the people who watch closely say, watch for the Buccaneers next year. This year's not their year, but next year, keep an eye on them. Had that happened with Jinder, then the things he did well, and the good attitude and the hard work and the fortitude and reinventing himself And yes, being better in the ring and on the mic than he had been, or at least having more than he had ever had a chance to show before, would have had a chance to work out. And instead now, one of the big stories of 2017 is people plugging their nose when they talk about Jinder and his push. They're like, we didn't want this. And I also think, sort of like Roman Reigns was a victim of Daniel Bryan and CM Punk, I think Jinder was a victim of fans going, this should be AJ.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the other championship then. Let's talk about the Universal title, because that had an interesting year as well, but I think the title had a less interesting year than the people that held it. So you started with Goldberg. Well, you started with Kevin Owens, who quickly lost it to Goldberg, which I think got a lot of people upset just because Kevin Owens got, that's the match where Kevin Owens got zero offense. And even though there was the distraction, so Kevin Owens had an excuse, it was still this sort of, we're going back to this plan where the part-timer, the legend comes in and destroys the guy that should probably be being built up. And I still, I still think that there is an argument to be made for that. But Goldberg eliminates Brock Lesnar. Wait, no, he didn't. Yeah, he did. Goldberg eliminated Brock Lesnar in the Royal Rumble, right?
Ooh, good question. Yes,
he
of course.
did.
Yeah,
he did.
That was the other sort of squash win for Goldberg.
Yes.
That was
Survivor
not a
Series,
1, 2, 3, but
Royal Rumble, and then at Fastlane, he won the Universal title from Kevin Owens. Brock Lesnar beats Goldberg at WrestleMania, and I think, to me, the Brock Lesnar-Goldberg match at WrestleMania was exactly what it should have been. It's exactly what I was waiting for as a fan. Realistically, it was what? It was, maybe 7 minutes or something like that, which still is quick, but it's about 14 times longer than any other match Goldberg had. And, it was this moment where we got reminded what a beast Brock Lesnar is, and he did take Goldberg's best offense, and it was this undisputed win for Brock Lesnar, which is what Brock Lesnar needs if he's going to be a part-time guy who holds that title. That's where it starts to get interesting, because I think that the whole Goldberg thing is going to be looked at as kind of this, short-term payoff. It's exciting to see Goldberg again, but when you look at history, you're like, why did they do that? What?
And building it around Goldberg wanting his kids to see him wrestle is the wrong reason for fans to care about something, because a lot of people have kids, and that doesn't mean you want to look at Facebook pictures of them doing everything that they ever do. Like, they're not our kids. They're not in my family. I thought that was it's a nice little sidebar story, but Goldberg should have had more of a mission. I'll tell you,
my kid will be 13 months old by the time we get to WrestleMania this year, and he would love to see me win the WWE Championship.
Exactly.
So if that's okay with AJ Styles...
but you're smart enough to know that's not something to build around. So, no, 100%. So, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I'm glad you did.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I didn't mean for it to be as long. But yeah, the Goldberg thing I think will be remembered as, wait a second, people saw it as a short-term novelty and never took seriously he was making a comeback. And I wish he would have sold us more on the idea that I got another run in me. And he touched on it, but he didn't make us believe that this was more than, I'll give it a try. I think people thought if he won, he'd retire the belt the next day.
Yeah, and I also think that he, as a person, didn't want... I almost feel like Bill Goldberg as a man, even though wrestling is scripted, he wanted people to know, well, no, yeah, I lost to Brock Lesnar, but I didn't really, it wasn't really me. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't really playing. I wasn't really racing. I was just doing this for my kid. I wasn't really, I wasn't doing this for real. But so, and that's kind of disappointing. And it makes you wish that, okay, like, we could have had a set of Goldberg exhibition matches that did not take up title space. But regardless, that's more of a 2016 story, I feel like, than a 2017 story. Just because, to me, Survivor Series of last year, Brock Lesnar losing to Goldberg, like, that's the whole story. And the rest of this is just sweeping up the mess. But Brock had an amazing year in 2017. And I say it was amazing because it was, for me, the first time, probably since he's been back, the first time in this incarnation of Brock Lesnar that I got reminded that Brock Lesnar is a very good professional wrestler when he wants to be. And I say professional wrestler meaning not only just in ring and he can do moves and stuff, but telling a story, selling, doing this thing. He's not just this guy who comes in, throws his fists around, does some MMA moves and goes home. When he wants to, he can put on really incredible matches. And I'm talking about the Samoa Joe match. I'm absolutely talking about the AJ Styles match. It was clear that when Brock Lesnar came to face both those guys, he wanted to have great matches. I think, the Braun Strowman match had its moment, but at the end of the day, because of the finish, it left a little to be desired. And I think, Brock did fine in the Fatal 4-Way appearances. That was just Brock being Brock. But I thought that Brock did a pretty good job this year of proving to people, for better or worse, maybe it's not the best quality, but when he wants to, he can have a great match.
Yes, and I think it's that realization or that knowledge that was frustrating at times when watching him, because we wanted him to seem like, it's one thing if he's just giving us all he can.
Right.
Like, it's just, he's beat up. UFC training, diverticulitis. He's been at this a long time, and, he's hitting 40 years old. Okay, but I think the feeling was he tries when he wants to, and he doesn't when he doesn't. And the Goldberg thing was a cake. I mean, it was a cakewalk in a way, but also a bit of a challenge. I mean, going 5 minutes of Goldberg when Goldberg is blowing up and, was never anything close to a ring general. And, all these years removed and a lot older. That was a challenge for Brock in a different way. But I think people wanted to get the feeling that he wasn't just laughing when he cashed his paycheck at the effort that he had to put in,
right? Which
is walk out, let Paul Heyman do all the talking, and he's great at not talking. There's very few people I've ever seen who are as good at communicating in an effective way when doing almost nothing. He has that natural sense of subtle facial expression and body language changes. That's fantastic. I'm not taking anything away from him, but from a pure sweat equity standpoint, Brock made a lot of money doing very little most of the time since his return to WWE, and especially in 2017. But if you see him against AJ Styles, if you see him against Joe, you see him against Braun, you see him against Roman, you see glimpses, or you want to see more than glimpses, of the guy that had a 60-minute Iron Man match with Kurt Angle, and a guy who has this big repertoire of moves, and not just relying on the kind of dumbed-down, cliched Suplex City, which was cool for a little bit, and then I think fans are sort of like, it's fun to chant, I like the T-shirt, but I think Brock delivering more is helpful to WWE business. And I understand the rationale of, no, he's a brand, he needs to be protected, less is more. But I think seeing him have a full-fledged match with AJ especially, I think whet people's appetite for, okay, he can still go. And now AJ's a guy who can bring out the best in people, but he can still go. And I think people are going to demand a little bit more from his matches, because the novelty of a UFC heavyweight champ just being in the ring is not there anymore. Now right. He's a WWE superstar, maybe not full-time, but he's around enough and wrestled enough. I think people are going to demand more out of him, or they're going to feel unsatisfied.
So the other thing that I was going to talk about, the mumps thing, we got sidetracked on what we were talking about, but that it was right. It was impactful for AJ Styles. That was the first point. The second point was Kurt Angle being put into that Shield match. Number one, before we get into the Shield, because we will get there, but you had this moment of like, oh my God, Kurt Angle's coming back. But I feel like after that appearance and after the appearance at the Survivor Series where we saw him in the singlet and everything, if he has a WrestleMania match, that's cool. But I kind of think that people's appetite have been settled as far as a Kurt Angle comeback goes. I just don't I don't think people, after seeing him, not that he's terrible, but he's obviously not what he was. Yeah. And you can just see that when he moves. I think people are okay if we never see a Kurt Angle singles match after those two showings this year.
It's one of the big prices that WWE paid for the Mump story is, yes, Kurt on very short notice saved the Survivor Series to a degree when Roman couldn't be part of that group. But if Kurt had not wrestled then and was part of a storyline that was meticulously and strategically built now to lead to a crescendo at WrestleMania against whomever, Jason Jordan, Triple H, whatever, pick your opponent. I mean, they could have gone different directions with it. I think there would be anticipation for that, and it would have made WrestleMania seem more special. And now that's one less card that they have to play at WrestleMania that they would have had the Shield reunited at Survivor Series as planned, and Kurt had yet to wrestle. And yeah, now I think people see Kurt. First of all, he's been marginalized as a GM. He's been talked down to, and he's kind of come across as the bumbling old guy sometimes who loses his train of thought and is being taken advantage of. I don't know. The way Kurt has been portrayed is not a warm, feel-good moment. He's become a character actor on Raw. He's not a legend.
He's kind of being portrayed exactly. It's like you took Mick Foley out of the script and just put Kurt Angle's name in there. I mean, it's the exact. Yep. It's the same line. He's not doing anything that's like Kurt Angle-y. He's just being the general manager. You could put anybody in that suit, and that's who it would be. They're just looking for a guy who's a legend, but, somebody that is not going to make anything up off the top of the head that we can push around a little bit.
Well, and there's some singers who used to be able to hit the high notes.
Right.
And you were just moved emotionally with their voice. And then you see them in concert, and now they've got 6 backup singers making up for what is a loss of vocal range. And you're sort of sad, but you're sort of glad you get to see them, and you're glad they're still on stage, but they can't sing anymore. They're not great singers anymore. They're nostalgic. With Kurt, he used to be great at the skits and what they did, his wit, and he seemed quick on his feet no matter how scripted the segments were, and he was fun. And now you watch him, and there's something that's not there that was once there. And, and Finn Balor, there's little things here and there where you're like, he's not even that immersed in the product. Like, I think wrestling fans want to believe it works for podcasts.
Yeah.
It applies to podcasts, and it applies to wrestlers. It applies to announcers. They want to listen to or watch in the pro wrestling where people who are as into it or more into it than they are. And Kurt comes across as a guy who he's an amateur wrestler, then a sports anchor, didn't know what to do. Maybe like Roman, he tried to build furniture for a while. I don't know. He finally got into wrestling, and he was a natural, but I don't know that he ever loved it. And it comes across now when he's not as sharp as he once was. So all that works against him. But as we saw with the Hardys and we see with Jericho, age is not an issue. If you're still good and you're willing to reinvent yourself and you're quick on your feet, you can make it work. But between Kurt being marginalized as a character, like you say, Mick Foley, and then not being quick on his feet and not seeming like he even knows what's going on sometimes, it hurts. And then in the ring, he looks brittle and broken. So all of that could have been masked, kind of like with Goldberg for a one-off at Mania.
Yeah.
And now it's a card I don't think they can play in 2018. It doesn't mean he won't wrestle, but I don't think it's a card that will mean anything if they do play it.
I'll tell you, they'll need to go heavy on story. Like, I think it could still be meaningful. They would just the card that you're talking about is Kurt Angle's in this match. We got to pay to see it. I don't think that that's a card they have. I think, though, that you could, because Kurt Angle, there are still a lot of Kurt Angle fans that did not see those 2 matches, right? And those Kurt Angle fans are more likely to tune into WrestleMania than any other show. So if you can tell a great story about Jason Jordan or Triple H leading to WrestleMania, I think you still have that part, but now it requires the story, whereas before the story was just bonus. The Jason Jordan thing I think is interesting, but I think it just deserves being touched upon right now because, again, that's kind of ongoing. But you're like me, I don't know, because I enjoyed what happened on Raw this week because to me, and we'll talk about this actually in a couple minutes because I want to talk about the storytelling in general that is happening in 2017. But we're witnessing a long play story here, right? I mean, you don't still think that Jason Jordan is being pushed on us as a babyface.
I don't think we're supposed to know where Jason Jordan is right now, and I'm not sure that they've had time to, because of the Dean Ambrose situation. I think that they're in a unexpected transition from what their plans were to what they are now not stuck with, because this in a way could be an opportunity to do something that just wasn't there before. I mean, sometimes injuries lead to better situations, sometimes worse. Sometimes they help you steer away from something that was bad, but no one could find a way to steer away from it. With Jordan, I mean, I'll just say this. I think the last 3-4 weeks, he's shown me that he has the range as a character, as an actor, so to speak, to be a main event guy. He had it in the ring to a degree. But again, being in there with Chad Gable in an NXT environment against great, perfect chemistry opponents, that doesn't mean you can have great singles matches and build a 10-year main event career around it. So we're still kind of waiting for that definitive verdict on Jordan, because, people who aren't wrestling fans and don't understand, they're like, well, if you look the part and there's script writers and you work out the moves ahead of time, you can be a main event guy. And it's just, that's not the case.
No, it isn't.
No, and it's hard to explain to people who don't watch and understand. Wrestling fans have a radar for what, if they want to pay to see you, and if they believe, if they pull you into the stories they tell in the ring. Jordan has shown enough where I'm confident he can be that guy, but again, it's not. The verdict's not in yet.
Well, yeah, and by that theory, all male models would get to be Jack Nicholson or Leonardo DiCaprio, right? Because there's scriptwriters for them and they look good, so why couldn't they do this?
And even in wrestling, there's that extra layer, which is you can be a great athlete and still not get it when it comes to how to tell a story, the economy of moves, and the what you do in between moves with body language and all of that. So with Jordan, I think teaming with Seth, it's like I Love Lucy. Ricky's going to figure out her scam, and she's going to cry, and at the end there's going to be this whole reveal. You know what's coming. But you're not quite sure exactly how Ricky's going to find out what Lucy's been up to. And in the end, you knew it was coming, but you still enjoy seeing it play out. I think that's where we are right now with Jordan. It's not going to work out well. He and Seth aren't going to be best friends, and 2 years from now, they're going to be tag team of the year. But that predictability is not a problem if you pick the right people and tell a good story. So now the question is, how does this fall apart? How does this partnership not work out? And what is the timing of it? And how does it happen? And then, from a standpoint of looking at the business as we do, Sam, and our listeners do, does it work? Is it good for business? Is it good for the show? Is it good for the two characters after they get done with whatever they're doing with each other? I'm really intrigued going into 2018 with Jordan. And a month ago, I had some doubts about whether this would even be worth investing in. I had doubts. It wasn't like I said, oh, this won't work. We just didn't have the evidence in. He's shown some range.
Yes, he has.
And he's had some bad moments, whiny stuff, where he lost the crowd, but he's correcting course and getting better quickly. And I think that's encouraging.
And I actually think he's really good whiny. In this, not to say he's a good hero when he's whining, but I think that as the guy who's requesting matches that he's obviously going to lose, and then he's losing them, and then he's going back and requesting another one as if he never lost that one. I think when he was in there with Roman Reigns and Samoa Joe, and he was clearly not their equal, but he was just being annoying about it, and then also delivering a suplex, I just think he looks comfortable in the ring. He doesn't come across to me as being lost in there, which is a huge, huge part of this thing. Let's talk about Roman Reigns, though, because Roman Reigns had a pretty incredible 2017. So you've got, the lead up to WrestleMania, and then you've got Roman retiring, or quote unquote retiring The Undertaker. We're not really talking about 2018. I believe that The Undertaker will be back in 2018, but I think he'll be at WrestleMania. But he has this match where, at least symbolically, The Undertaker puts his hat down. Then a couple months later, he has this match where he doesn't retire him, but at least symbolically, John Cena takes a bow, and I believe that symbolically, again, that was the moment that John Cena becomes a part-time guy and not a full-time guy, and that was because he couldn't beat Roman Reigns. Great. Then the Shield comes back together, which, genius, perfect timing, and I think you can hear it in the reaction still, helped Roman Reigns more than anyone. It helped Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose too, and they needed it at that point. But it really helped Roman Reigns, and it helped remind people of how much that faction meant to him. Now, it's really, really interesting with the Shield because we haven't even gotten any real moments at all from the Shield, because either Roman has the mumps or Dean's injured or whatever. It's snake bit, as they say, and not meant to be. But all that said, just the idea that we as fans know that they're all friends, that the Shield is all friends again, has given all of them that extra oomph. And now you've got Roman Reigns with the Intercontinental title, which is interesting, but I think has been... I think over the last 3 weeks or so, it's only been very recently, but over the last 3 weeks, even though Roman's got the Intercontinental title, even though he beat The Miz, I feel when I'm watching the show that the machine, and maybe this is just because it's leading to Royal Rumble, maybe it's not a long-term thing, maybe it's just short-term, but I feel like the WWE machine is telling me that Braun Strowman is the guy, not Roman Reigns. And that's the first time, as much as Braun Strowman has been pushed, and even when he was injuring Roman Reigns and all this stuff, I was being told that Braun Strowman is a villain for Roman Reigns, who is the guy to destroy. When Braun Strowman became a good guy, it was still like, okay, Braun Strowman is not a villain anymore, but Roman Reigns is the guy. In the last 3 weeks, and again, it could just be Royal Rumble buildup, but I have felt like I am being conditioned to believe that Braun Strowman is the indestructible force of the WWE.
I think Braun is a gift to Roman in that it takes some of the pressure off of Roman, where Roman doesn't have to be forced into more situations than his character can endure or the fans are going to embrace. And so that's worked out well. I mean, the more top guys you have, the better, especially when they're as different from one another as Braun and Roman are. Braun goes back to what I was saying about somebody who the fans chose. I think the fans feel like they steered the career of Braun, the character of Braun, into the place that he's in. And where Reigns, I think they feel that it wasn't something they had a say in and they were expected to go along with it. But now, because the fans got what they wanted with Braun, I think there's more goodwill with the brand itself to accept Roman. And then with Roman, you also have, if Seth and Dean like him, and he's having good matches, and he's not being put in situations that make me dislike him. Now I'm getting a sense, yes, there's still the boos for Roman when he comes out, but it does, unlike 6 months ago, when people said this was the case from a corporate official word standpoint, I didn't buy it 6 months ago. Mm-hmm. Oh, they're just booing him because it's a thing to do. Now I think there is some of that going on. And I think that some people boo him when his music hits, almost as a Pavlovian reaction to it.
Yeah.
And then as they see him perform, they're like, I don't dislike him as much. Now, I don't think like on Monday on Raw, looking down at Samoa Joe at ringside and calling him boy, helps. There's still little things Roman does where I'm like, that's not the best language to use, or that's not the best demeanor. And there's still sometimes he comes across like he's, clocking into work and playing a role and clocking out to go be home with his kid. I want him to seem like on air, WWE, the journey that he's on and the goals that he has are actually really important to him, and the fans supporting him is important for that to happen. And he seems resistant to doing that because it might seem uncool. And so that's the course correction that I think he has some creative room to go on, because Braun creates some of that space where Roman isn't leaned on to do everything and carry the show at this moment in terms of lead baby faces. So it's an interesting situation to watch. The Dean injury is a very fresh twist in this ongoing story. I'm still assuming Roman takes on Brock at WrestleMania and wins the Universal Championship. But I think it's less. I think it's gone from 99.9% to 6% right now because of other things that are in motion.
Yeah. Do you think, is there a possibility that the WWE is looking around and being like, oh, we've just realized what AJ Styles is? Because, again, that's only a couple months ago, if our theory is correct. We now see the potential in Braun Strowman as a good guy. While we still believe in Roman Reigns, maybe we have a couple more baskets to put our eggs in than we thought we did.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I do. I don't think Vince is any less committed to Roman Reigns being the poster boy, the guy on the billboard in Orlando heading into WrestleMania, the guy that he wants people to think of when they think of WWE 2018. I think Vince still thinks Roman is the right guy to be that poster boy as the lead star. But I think from an actual 5 hours of weekly television standpoint of the main roster, and that there's a feeling that Roman's head can shrink a little bit on the billboard, and there's some people whose heads can get a little bigger and share the spotlight and the burden of being the face of the brand. I think they feel like they're less dependent on Roman being the guy. And I think that ultimately is good for the brand, and it's good for the fans, and it will lead to fans being more willing to accept Roman if they don't feel they have to accept Roman to still be WWE fans.
So as far as the women go in 2017, I thought it fits into your definition of 2017. Like, it's just kind of, it's progression, but it's as much as one would expect. You had, I think, Paige returning is a giant story in terms of women. I don't know how many people expected that, especially in the role that she's in. I think the rise of Alexa Bliss was certainly something that happened in 2017 because she really, really is positioning herself as a woman to watch more so than a lot of other people. And then of course you had the first ever Money in the Bank women's match, but I felt the same way. It was controversial with the James Ellsworth finish, but I just feel like we just are on a run of so many first time ever women's matches that not every single moment is going to be carved in stone in history as this was the moment that everything changed. I think your transition, your presentation of the women's championship and saying we're not divas anymore, we're women. I think that triple threat match at WrestleMania from Dallas last year, those moments will always remain. Maybe the Hell in a Cell moment between Charlotte and Sasha, but I don't think in 2017 there were any moments. I just think we remained on the road for women that we should be on. We remained on a positive road, but I don't think that any great leaps were made.
No, I'm with you. I mean, Charlotte, after the Superstar shakeup, I was like, all right, it's going to be the summer of Charlotte and AJ on SmackDown. They're going to correct course with AJ.
Yeah.
What the mistake that I think they made in January, they'll post WrestleMania fix it. And SmackDown there's going to be two, we talk about how big the face is on the proverbial billboard, heading to the arena that's on the freeway. And I thought, well, SmackDown's going to be, there's AJ's face and there's Charlotte's face. They're the same size and they're going to really put their money where their mouth is about the women's revolution and make Charlotte a centerpiece as much as AJ. And I thought she's not as good as AJ in any category, but that's not an insult to her. It's just AJ's so good. But Charlotte has some star power, some X factors that the Flair name, her size, her look, she's good enough in the ring and on promos that even if she's better off not being the best wrestler in the ring, but if she's in with somebody better than her, she can look like she's great. Mm-hmm. So all the pieces were there. And what'd they do? Naomi, ensemble. It wasn't a cat. It was, a mix and match. And I thought it was a lost opportunity. And like even headed into this last pay-per-view, Charlotte didn't cut a promo, about what it meant to be facing Natalya. There's history between those two.
Right.
There's a championship at stake. And it was, no, we're just laying the groundwork for this Stephanie McMahon grand announcement. And it's more about setting the stage for that in the Rumble than it was about Charlotte. I have yet to feel that a SmackDown storyline is about Charlotte in 2017. It's only about generically the women's revolution. And that's been disappointing. So I hope that 2018 is better in that respect.
Well, I think Charlotte gets taken for granted a little bit because they're like, well, Charlotte's the best and she's always going to be the best, so she'll just be there when we need her. And in the meantime, there's all this going on. And I really do think it's funny that you say that that's what you expected on the billboards over the summer, because it's almost like they're finally starting to get it, because in December, did you see the poster for Clash of Champions? It was AJ's face and Charlotte's face, and they were the same size, and those were the two faces on the Clash of Champions poster. Yeah, so, but you're right in the sense that they made it an ensemble thing. Let's talk about storytelling, okay, as we close out breaking down 2017, because I think we're in a very unique place for storytelling. Like there were there's always going to be not great moments, but I think there were some really good moments. I think all the Enzo stuff this year has actually been really good in the sense that they took something that was really going on, that the internet was really talking about, with a guy that maybe they didn't have a whole lot else for, and they realized they can not only make this thing relevant, but maybe if this story gets big enough, allow it to make 205 Live a little bit more relevant. And I think it was effective. I don't think 205 Live is still all that, but it did a lot. That storyline, the Enzo storyline, has done a lot for 205 Live and the interest in that show. But I think that the long-term storytelling is what feels like could be making a comeback. And I don't want to count my chickens and get excited about this, but we get into the Jason Jordan thing. And it's clear to me that there is an end game with this, that I think it's naive or pessimistic, I should say, to watch this Jason Jordan thing and think it's just the same old stuff. Like I think that we're going someplace with this Jason Jordan thing, and the reason that I think that is because there is movement in the story week to week. It is not a stagnant story. We look over on SmackDown, and the stuff that you and I were talking about as we led towards Survivor Series a couple months ago, with Shane McMahon doing heelish stuff and Daniel Bryan was actually in the right, that debate that you and I had in real life has now become what the storyline is, and that's been told since, the end of October? So we're looking, that Daniel Bryan Shane story is just a thing of beauty right now, because from the end of October until now you're finally starting to develop some tension with something that started in October. You're the same thing over here with this Jason Jordan thing. The Enzo thing drawing from real life, and also kind of, that's a long play as well. I feel like maybe some of that long play is coming back, which I think is a good thing.
I do too. And I think, like with the Jordan situation, we do not know where that would have gone if not for some unexpected twists, and this Dean Ambrose thing being a major thing. And even Kurt Angle wrestling at Survivor Series. Like, how much did that change what they were going to do with Jason Jordan? But I think what we're seeing is there's a large structure and framework that they have in mind. And even when there's a twist and a turn, they don't panic and hot shot. They go, all right, now we have to call an audible.
Yeah.
We have to augment our long-term story. How are we going to change things? But this is still going to be a long-term story that we tell, even if we have to adjust where we initially thought this was going to head or the pace at which it would change. And so I do think that there is more of that going on. Now, we can sometimes dispute what the long story should be, or what the stress should be, or what the parameters for deciding to do something or push somebody should be. But it's always good when that happens. Again, I'll go back to AJ, though. I want to see some long-term storylines where there's 2 or 3 wrestlers in 2018 who, by the time they get around to feuding with AJ for the championship, it feels like something that the fans have been anticipating, as opposed to us wondering the weeks heading into it, what are they going to do? So I would say make the long-term planning more widespread. Apply it to more things, including not just what you're trying to make money with right now, but give yourself that option. I don't know if options work. If it's not going to pay off right now or in the next month or two, still have your eye on something for 6 months from now where you're planting seeds. I'd like to see that long-term planning go towards storylines that aren't even happening yet, but they're laying the foundation. Had they done that with Jinder, the Jinder experiment might have been it might have been a different story.
Yeah.
So that'd be my suggestion.
And I think that in doing that, you can actually create marquee stars that wouldn't normally be marquee stars. Like the Jinder thing, you can convince us that he should be main eventing. I think with that philosophy of, okay, putting the work in, I could easily see Sami Zayn as a heel contender to AJ's WWE Championship with a little bit of work done. And I think that could happen. Who do you think had the best year, or who do you think 2017 is really about? I mean, Sami Zayn, maybe some could say, because I feel like Sami Zayn is a bad guy right now, is the best stuff he's ever done. That said, I think that the best Sami Zayn stuff is going to be next year. But who do you think is the guy that you would, or girl, that you would look at and say, yeah, 2017 belonged to them?
Well, I mean, I guess like I thought you were headed towards who is it going to be in 2018, and that's hard to predict. But no, I think the year 2017 belonged to AJ in the sense that the machine wasn't behind him as much as the fans were. Mm-hmm. I think Braun Strowman is maybe a top 10 story of the year in the sense of that was unexpected, and some of it is still in transition. But I mean, really. You made a case for Roman Reigns enduring a lot of pushback against his push, and they stayed with it, and he made some adjustments, and he won over some fans. Yeah, and
I should have mentioned, too, by the way, I hate to interrupt you, but I should have mentioned, too, when we're talking about Roman Reigns, that the night after, I should have mentioned that when I mentioned that he retired The Undertaker, quote-unquote, the night after WrestleMania, his in-ring promo, if you want to call it a promo, was maybe the best thing that Roman Reigns has ever done.
And it's astounding because it could have destroyed somebody.
Yes.
Somebody could have stood there and looked like that was the break point where they are like, it's not for me. They don't like me. I don't belong. All my doubts have been validated. And instead, he stood there and he took it some more. And it just, I think in the end, it was sort of like, let them get it out of their system and be man enough to stand there and not be affected by it, but almost show kind of a sense of humor about it. And not a shoulder shrug like, I don't care what you think, but I'm listening and I still believe I'm the guy, and I just need to spend the rest of the year proving it to you. And I think that's the journey that I think fans think he's been on in a credible way.
What do you expect or hope or think that we will see in 2018 in terms of kind of bigger picture things or moments, people? Like what are you looking forward to seeing in 2018 if it comes to fruition?
Well, we haven't brought up NXT.
Right.
And NXT has sort of had a similar, I think it had a comeback year, but I'm excited to see Drew McIntyre, come onto the main roster at some point. The injury might change the timing of that because I think he'll be a NXT takeover wrestler WrestleMania weekend, not a main roster call-up in time. There's no way to do that. But mid to late 2018, I believe he can be a significant star for them. And I think Adam Cole or Johnny Gargano there's some NXT wrestlers that I'm excited to see get added to the main roster. And you can look at, Drew can be a heel or a face. And from a size standpoint, he can come in as a heel and work AJ. Adam Cole, size-wise, can come in as a heel and work against AJ. So there's some interesting matches once we get past WrestleMania for AJ that I'm excited about. So I want 2018 to be the year of AJ Styles, where it feels like the machine got behind him in the same way that the fans are. I mean, everywhere. We talk on my show to On-Site Correspondents after Raw and SmackDown. And on Tuesday nights, almost invariably, the people in the building, who got the biggest pop? Oh, AJ by far. Like, no matter, Randy and AJ, maybe they're close, but it's always AJ in the conversation. And his pops are bigger than his push. So he still can go. And I just think WWE, 30% of Vince's focus should be, how do we feed AJ some opponents so AJ can shine and the fans can embrace him more? So I'm looking forward to that. And I'm intrigued by Jason Jordan right now and how high he can rise. I'm big on journeys. Like, I want to watch wrestlers on journeys. It's why I'm bored with Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt, because they're just on a treadmill. They never go anywhere. They are what they are, and they do what they do. So I'd love to see Randy and Bray be booked in a way where they're on a journey, where I go, something is changing here. And I'm interested to see where they go and how this gets affected. It's what Seth is on right now with Jason Jordan, which is interesting. So I think there's a lot set up, but I think my another top wish for sure is for the women's division to go from talking about a women's revolution and patting themselves on the back collectively for being part of something and get to the fundamentals of telling stories about two wrestlers feuding, either for a title, to settle a grudge, or to earn a title shot, and trust the women to be booked in a similar way to the men and stop this kind of cruiserweight X division approach where you talk about them as a collective. Let Charlotte be a star.
Yes.
Let Alexa Bliss be a star. Let Asuka be a star. Stop having them break character when Stephanie walks out to make an announcement that will move collectively the women forward. I want the women to now, okay, it's fine they did that in 2017. Now we've made that our point. Now let's book them better in 2018.
I said the same thing about how annoying that was, I think, last week when they had to break character and not be competitive when they were announcing the Rumble. But regardless of all that, I think that 2017, I would give 2017 to Braun Strowman, because Braun Strowman is a guy that not that long ago, when there were rumors that he was going to get the Undertaker match, all of us guffawed And we're like, they have got to be losing their minds if they would ever think that. And now, if you told me that Braun Strowman was going to get the Undertaker match, we'd lose our minds on the opposite end of the spectrum. We'd all be over there. In terms of 2018, I think a couple of things. I firmly believe for AJ Styles, I think by the end of 2018, AJ will almost have a John Cena level of credibility inside the WWE. That AJ will be the sort of the guy that is looked upon as the benchmark, and it will be universally accepted amongst fans, amongst office, and he will kind of be what I think that they wish John Cena was, in the sense that the office is behind him, kids love him, but we all still love him too. I think that he is going to be that magic guy, and by the end of 2018, he's not going to be the best guy on SmackDown. He's going to be the John Cena level player, and that's. I mean, for him to show up at the Royal Rumble in 2016, and then by the end of 2018 be that guy is just, it's more than phenomenal. It's astronomical. But I think that's what 2018 I think and hope has for AJ.
Real quick, Sam, do you think Vince would embrace that, or see that as getting in the way of Roman?
No, here's what I think. I think, and that leads me right to my next point, because I believe that things will get more flexible. I think that they're just going to acknowledge this is going on with AJ. They have the best wrestler in the world here, and somehow, even though he should be this guy that we got from Japan that we can squeeze a couple years out of him before he retires, he's actually this new generation of guys that can wrestle way longer than we thought anybody possible, and he can be John Cena level popular today. So we're going to make him John Cena level popular today. I think that in 2018, Braun Strowman is going to take a lot of what was laid out for Roman Reigns. I think that it's going to surprise people, but I really think that Braun Strowman is going to come in, that a lot's been laid out for Roman, and I think Braun Strowman's going to take it. It's going to be given to him. I think that, this is a dangerous game, and it could work out negatively for Braun Strowman in the eyes of the fans, but I think that he's going to be given a lot of that. And I think at that point, Roman's got one of two things that he could do. We've got the potential to see a better Roman than we've ever seen, because now you've got a guy who actually has to fight for it instead of it kind of be. He's not given something that he now has to live up to. He's got to fight to get it, and once he gets it, he will have fought for it. The spot is what I'm talking about. Or
fans will sense he's fighting for something he wants,
exactly,
instead of being given something he's taking for granted.
Exactly, we'll know, and it's not a test. It's real life being given to Braun,
right?
And Roman, all Roman can do is try to either prove these guys wrong, or Roman, because he's not been in that position before, won't handle it well. I don't know. I think that'll be interesting. And my third thing that I absolutely, and I just came to this realization last week, I 100% believe that Daniel Bryan will be in a WWE ring next year, wrestling.
Interesting.
I for a while, because WWE does weird, wacky things where they have no end game. And when we were first talking about this Shane McMahon, Daniel Bryan scenario, I was like, this could easily just be something with no end game, or another thing where, like what they did with The Miz and Daniel Bryan, where it's just tension for tension's sake, really. But when they started making it the central plot line of the TV show, right? It is the storyline on SmackDown right now, the tension between Daniel Bryan and Shane McMahon. And Daniel Bryan has been saying it in interviews. He said it in an interview with me that he is wrestling again, that there is no doubt he is going to wrestle again. And he said there's a 20% chance. He said, I would like to wrestle in WWE. I would like to wrestle in a WWE ring again. If that's not possible, I will wrestle in somebody else's ring, which is the first time that he really has used that language. And I think that WWE knows this and knows what a big deal it would be to any promotion in the world to have the most beloved guy. He's the most beloved wrestler on the planet, probably. and the story of him coming back, even though you talk about the machine not wanting you, not getting behind you, regardless of what the real story is, the story is the machine did not want Daniel Bryan to wrestle, and he refused to say no. So now he's either wrestling, in the Hammerstein for Ring of Honor, or in the Tokyo Dome for New Japan, or in some local indie show, because Daniel Bryan is prone to do something like that too. So I don't think that that's the narrative that WWE is going to want. I think they're going to figure out some way, and I think they're going to pull off a Daniel Bryan, Shane McMahon match. I think it's going to happen.
Well, fans resent if Daniel Bryan's comeback match is against Shane McMahon and not a wrestler who wrestles.
Well, I don't think that they will resent that as the first match, as long as it's a good match. I think that cannot be the only match. I think that once, I think it's okay for him to have a Shane McMahon comeback match, and I guess I don't have a huge problem with that, and Shane's in the position where he can put himself in those, that's just one of the benefits of being Shane McMahon. And I don't really take much issue with that. But I do absolutely agree with you. After the Shane McMahon match, we somehow have to get to a Brock Lesnar match. We somehow have to get to a Nakamura match. We somehow have to get to the match, which is the AJ Styles match. Like those matches 100% absolutely have to happen. I do not think that Daniel Bryan will be a full-time member of the roster. I think he'll be a working member, a general manager who wrestles matches. But I do think that which is complicated because all the guys I laid out besides Brock Lesnar are baby faces, and as is Daniel Bryan. But I still think that you could have a scenario where a babyface AJ Styles says, "I've beaten everybody that I can beat on this roster," and Daniel Bryan says, "You have not beaten everybody." And and you have that moment. Like I believe that 2018 will be Daniel Bryan's return to a WWE ring. And maybe that's wishful thinking on my part, but I think it's going to happen. I don't have any inside information at all. This is just me being a fan, watching TV, doing what we do. But that's my guess.
I think we're going to see Daniel Bryan wrestle in the next year.
Yeah.
And it is just a matter of where, when, and against whom. And, even Sami Zayn, you talk about little hints, Sami turning heel and injecting Daniel Bryan into it. Well, you didn't embrace me the way you did Daniel Bryan. And now Sami, like you mentioned earlier, what happened to Sami in 2018? He looked like he was going nowhere. And now he's kind of in the Jericho spot with Owens, playing off of Owens. And that's a good spot to be in. And he's starting to shine. Do you get to a point where Sami against Bryan feels like a top 5 or top 7 match for Daniel Bryan if he has 5 to 7 big matches in the next year or 2 or 3?
I think definitely. I think you can go there after the Shane match too, because that's,
yes.
Sami Zayn making Shane feel like Daniel's on his side is going to get Daniel upset, and the story's there.
It is, yeah. So with Daniel Bryan, what you don't want is fans to look at the Daniel Bryan return as the boss trying to figure out a way to make his son popular again or useful, and they're spending Daniel Bryan's return on a Shane match when the luster is off, the shine is off of Shane right now. The crowd reaction last week was really telling. The last couple of weeks, the fans are choosing Bryan over Shane, and no matter what story you tell, if fans are resistant to any kind of payoff with Bryan being, quote, wasted against somebody like Shane, even if the match is good, because I think people feel AJ was, wasted's not the right word, but that AJ was fed to Shane to give Shane a moment. It wasn't Shane was fed to AJ to give AJ a moment. Maybe that's not fair or accurate in the sense that maybe a Shane match gave a boost to AJ in ways that AJ fans at the time didn't realize. But I just think they have to be careful that it doesn't look like Shane is being fed opponents at the expense of what the opponents could be doing otherwise. But ultimately, there's so much being invested in the storyline that I think it's almost too late to back out of it. But it has to be clear it's not like a one-off or a one-time only for Daniel Bryan and now he goes back into retirement. Then people would be really resentful of Shane being the guy who got that spot. But I'm with you. I think we see a number of matches unroll for Bryan if he stays in WWE, gets cleared, and wrestles. 2018 is just in a very broad sense, and based on this Daniel Bryan talk and others, I think 2018 could be a really fun year for WWE fans in terms of a lot of things that happened in 2017 end up setting the stage for a better 2018.
Yeah, I absolutely think so too. And Wade Keller, I appreciate you, as always, giving me so much of your time. What can people do to hear you on a regular basis?
Sure. Well, first things first, you can subscribe to my free show that's on 4 days a week at Podcast One. Just search Wade Keller in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. We do a post-Raw show that's up within a few hours of Raw going off the air. Same thing Wednesday mornings after SmackDown on Tuesday night. We do a Thursday flagship with a rotation of co-hosts and then interviews every Friday. You can also be a VIP member. I do about a dozen other podcasts per week with different hosts and different formats. And I will give a New Year's special offer to your listeners, Sam, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please do.
Sign up for 99 cents for a full month. We'll give a $9 off deal. It's normally $9.99. They can apply the $9 off to a 3-month or 1-year sub too. Just do coupon code SAM99 when you go to pwtorch.com/govip. I won't run down all the benefits that come with the VIP membership, but I think people who are enjoyed this conversation will really enjoy the new content we put out every day, plus an unmatched library of 30 years of podcasts, retro radio shows, and over 1,500 weekly newsletters chronicling the wrestling industry. It's the largest single place to go to find out what happened behind the scenes, some great interviews, Torch Talk transcripts, audio interviews over the decades. So yeah, go check out the bullet points that come with the membership and just give us a try for 99 cents in the month of January. It's going to be a big month. So sign up now and we'll give you that $9 off. So it's just SAM99 is a coupon code on the sign up form at pwtorch.com/govip. We'd love to have you give us a try.
Yeah, and I would recommend it. It's so much content there. It's so much fun to just peruse through, especially the older stuff, and just get, because, you know, people forget, like, there is, to me, the most fascinating time in pro wrestling, and maybe it's because I'm my age and it's the time I was a kid, but it's the time when the internet wasn't the internet. So all the information wasn't out there, and like the guys that do interviews were not doing 50 interviews a week and all this stuff. And there's all this sort of inside stuff from when the newsletter world was really the newsletter world. And it's just that stuff always gets me. So everybody go check that out. And I appreciate you giving all my listeners that great deal. And Wade Keller, I appreciate you, man. I hope you have a happy new year. And thanks for doing the show.
Sam, you helped me put the year in perspective, having this discussion with you, and it will help me as I march through the rest of the week here, writing and talking about wrestling too. It's always great talking with you.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
You bet.
Here is Sam Roberts.
And as always, thanks to Wade Keller for being a part of this thing. Look, I think that it's going to be an interesting year for 2018, and I loved Wade Keller's point at the end of that conversation about how maybe 2017 is setting us up for 2018, because there's a lot on the horizon. You know, if we want to talk about the world of WWE, of course, the idea that Vince McMahon may be starting a football league is something, even though it's not directly associated with WWE because it's Vince McMahon's personal money. It's still Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon is WWE. So it does affect us, and it does affect the WWE and all that. So I'm very, very interested to see what happens with that. But I really do. You know, a video came out just this week during the dark match after SmackDown. You know, they do SmackDown, and then they do 205 Live, and then for the audience, they do like a dark match, which is some kind of either tag or six-man tag involving Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn and Nakamura, and I think AJ Styles was in there. There's Randy Orton, maybe, a whole bunch of people. But Daniel Bryan was playing the role of guest referee. And at one point in the match, and there's a Twitter video of this that somebody took at ringside because obviously it wasn't televised, Daniel Bryan starts running the ropes. And he starts doing that spot where he's running the ropes and Sami Zayn is running the ropes on the opposite side. And it's just really interesting because it's stuff like that, you know, just the fact that he's a special referee and allowed in the ring, that is not something that WWE would have done a year ago, 6 months ago even. Just the fact that when he was special referee at Clash of Champions, he shoved Shane McMahon. There was physical action going on. Let's remember that we found out via Instagram video that he was training Brie Bella on how to wrestle, And the WWE did not want Brie posting the video because they did not want video of Daniel Bryan in a ring to exist. That's how strict things were only a few months ago. And now he's a special referee. Now he's shoving Shane McMahon. Now there's tension. This just goes to my theory that Daniel Bryan will be back in that WWE ring. And I think it'll happen at WrestleMania, but it's definitely going to happen in 2018. I'm anxious to see what happens in 2018, but in order to really figure it out, I think we kind of know at least where things are going for the first day of 2018, because that's the next time Monday Night Raw is going to be on, and that's what we'll talk about this week in the state of wrestling. I also want to give a shout-out. I tweeted some of you guys. I put some of you guys on my Instagram stories. I was so flattered and amazed, and it's just so cool on Christmas to see people getting Sam Roberts t-shirts, Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast t-shirts, Sam Roberts Little Kid t-shirts, Sam Roberts 8-bit t-shirts, Not Sam t-shirts, all that stuff happening for, like, people opening gifts on Christmas Day and getting Not Sam shirts is just amazing to me. So if you want to be part of that, you can go to prowrestlingtees.com/Sam Roberts or just notsam.com/merch, and you can be a part of that. There's all kinds of Sam Roberts, Not Sam, Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast t-shirts available. And also, if it's something you're interested in, I'm considering setting up an independent store where it wouldn't be through Pro Wrestling Tees. It would be shirts that I would personally have screen printed with the Not Sam logo on it. Those are not available on Pro Wrestling Tees, but the Not Sam logo is, of course, you can see it in the corner of all my videos. You can see it when we do shows from the Not Sam studios. You see it on the monitor on the desk. It's everywhere. So you know, I think you know what I'm talking about. It says Not Sam, and it's got the red stars above it. It says I'm Not Sam on it. If that's something that you're interested in getting on a t-shirt, on a baby onesie, on a hat, whatever it is, tell me. And I'm starting to do the initial research into setting up a Not Sam store in terms of what's wanted. So let me know out there by tweeting me, sending me a message on Facebook, leaving me a comment on Instagram. I read them all. However you want to get me, and I'm going to get you into the state of wrestling right now.
It's now time for this week's State of Wrestling.
So I opened up in the comments section of my Facebook page this week, facebook.com/NotSam. What are the top 5 stories? Because those are the stories that we're going to be going over this week in the state of wrestling. And you guys pretty closely matched up with what I had. There were a couple of differences, but I'm going to do that every week over at Facebook/NotSam so you guys have a voice in what are probably the top 5 stories for the state of wrestling this week. Story number 1 is Raw on Christmas and New Year's and SmackDown the day after Christmas. WWE going live for the holidays is story number 1. I got some heat on Twitter for saying how much I was enjoying Raw being on Christmas. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with fans who are not working enjoying the show that's being put on for them on Christmas. As a matter of fact, even if you have sympathy for athletes or performers that have to work on Christmas, the best thing that you can do is enjoy the show that they're putting on. The worst thing that you can do is sit there complaining about the fact that the show is on, because the guys that are working the show, at least if they have to do this, want to know that somebody out there is being entertained by it, that it's not just for naught. That said, I also think that athletes work on Christmas. Football players work on Christmas. You know what I mean? Sports that are in season will play games on Christmas, will play games on Thanksgiving. And while it's not the most pleasant thing in the world to have to work on Christmas, Finn Balor posted a tweet that he had a conversation with his mom. He was having a Christmas with his mom. And on Christmas Eve, he said, "Mom, I'm sorry I'm not going to be able to see you on Christmas, but I have to go wrestle on Raw." And his mom responded, "Well, the only thing worse than that is not being able to wrestle on Raw on Christmas." Quite frankly, if my job was to be a WWE superstar, I would work on Christmas. You know, it's one of those things that also, as we talked about in the interview segment, they got days off before this. So the week leading up to Christmas, the WWE superstars had no house shows. They had no live events. So they did get time to spend with their families. And now we're getting really in the nitty-gritty. The call time to Monday Night Raw was later than usual this time. So a lot of the superstars could wake up on Christmas morning in their homes and then get on a flight. I don't think that we as fans need to act as the representatives for the wrestlers' union and make sure that they're all getting as much family time as they need. That's up to the individual performers to get it. Our job is to be entertained by the sports entertainers. And I was. And I think a lot of us were. And I think it would have been an issue had the show been a throwaway show. But the fact that the show was not a throwaway show and actually did make sense and allow us more storyline and bring us further along than we were last week means that it was worth it and it was worthwhile. So I, for one, am happy that I could come home on Christmas night and turn on WWE. I think it's a cool thing. And maybe I'm a selfish person, but that's how I feel. The number 2 story this week, we found out that Dean Ambrose, Raw superstar Dean Ambrose, is going to be out for 9 months, which I think surprised everybody. I don't think anybody thought that the injury was going to be that severe. But Dean Ambrose is out for 9 months. Now, we'll talk about what happened with his partner later here in the State of Wrestling. But that's a big thing. And you have to think about it in terms of the Shield reunion, because the Shield reunion from the beginning has just not been able to catch any steam. Fans still love it, because at the end of the day, when they see those 3 guys together, or just know that the 3 guys are working together, fans are going to get excited. When the music comes on and Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose and Roman Reigns all fight for the same cause, fans are going to get excited because the Shield was such a force in the world of WWE, and it was short-lived, meaning that it was one of the few things that WWE split up before fans were ready for it. They left us wanting more, which doesn't happen that often. So when it does, the Shield kind of gets a pass forever. I don't think there will ever come a time where people tire of the Shield as a group. It's going to be interesting to see how this Dean Ambrose injury affects everybody else. The reunion of the Shield was not just good for Roman Reigns. It was good for Roman. It was good for Seth. It was good for Dean. Before the Shield reunited, Roman Reigns was getting booed out of buildings. And Seth and Dean, they weren't getting booed, but they didn't have any specific direction with their characters. There were other good guys. Braun Strowman was on the rise. Brock Lesnar was the champion. There were all these guys that were coming up. Samoa Joe was rising, and Ambrose and Rollins were kind of doing what Ambrose and Rollins have always done. And I think that the Shield reunion refreshed all 3 guys in a way that was necessary for all 3 guys. I don't think that this is going to slow down Dean Ambrose in the long run. I think this is going to be one of those things that in 9 months, it's going to be a long 9 months for Dean, if that's how long it takes. But when he does come back, it's going to be amazing. I think people are going to be excited for it. And you talk about a refresher for a character, you've got it. But I don't think that the WWE is going to be able to rely on the Shield being a union anymore. I think that the Shield being a union was something that the WWE was going to take at least to WrestleMania. And that while Roman, Seth, and Dean were not going to be competing as the Shield at WrestleMania, it would still be known that the 3 of them were a unit. Dean Ambrose, not only will he not make the Royal Rumble, not only will he not make WrestleMania, but if this 9-month forecast is true, Dean Ambrose may not be back in time for SummerSlam. That's how long we're talking. We may not see Dean Ambrose until September of 2018. He's going to miss almost all of 2018. So will the fact that Roman and Seth Rollins get along, will that be enough to maintain the the goodwill that the fan base has given Roman Reigns for his Shield thing? Will the fact that the Shield is still a unit, even though Dean Ambrose is not on TV anymore, will it still give those guys that shot in the arm that they needed? I worry that it won't. I feel like without Dean Ambrose on TV for the long haul, I mean, when Roman Reigns was off TV for, whatever it was, maybe 3-4 weeks, it was starting to get to a point where you looked at Seth and Dean going, what are you guys doing? Why are you guys dressed up like the Shield? You're not the Shield. Roman Reigns isn't here. So I don't see how you can maintain the Shield as a unit if Dean Ambrose is going to be off TV for 9 months. So it'll be interesting to see. That said, we saw a direction that Seth was going in, which we'll talk about in a moment. But I do think that they're going to have to figure out a way for Roman to maintain some of the goodwill that he's gotten because of the Shield. Because right now, he's back to getting about half cheers and half boos. And I think that that's because of the Shield. If the Shield is not around, he runs a risk of going back to getting all boos, which is not what you want for Roman Reigns for the next 3 months or so. Especially as popular and as good as Braun Strowman is right now, I don't think that you need that messing with the fact that Roman Reigns is trying to get fan support. We'll see what happens with it, but again, and I think I feel for Dean Ambrose because it cannot be easy for a guy that makes his living doing what these guys do to have to sit at home for 9 months. You're going to have to watch a Royal Rumble, a WrestleMania, and potentially a SummerSlam all go by the wayside, all the whole while thinking, I could have been doing this, I could have been doing that. Because let's be honest, hypothetically, if the Shield exists as a unit into WrestleMania, hypothetically, if Roman Reigns were to walk out of WrestleMania as the Universal Champion, well, you've got potential for Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose to both want a shot at that Universal title. And you don't even have to break them up. You don't even have to make it like this good guy versus bad guy thing. You could easily make it member of the Shield versus member of the Shield. Dean Ambrose versus Roman Reigns for that Universal title and get a lot of interest. That's one of those matches where fans get to choose, okay, both these guys are good guys, but who's my favorite? And for a moment, I mean, it's Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior all over again. For a moment, we get to see where does the fan base stand? Are they with Roman Reigns? Are they with Dean Ambrose? That's the type of stuff that is not far-fetched. That's the type of stuff that is clearly en route based on where we're at with these characters. Unfortunately, Dean Ambrose won't be there. Now, all that said, I think that that's probably going to be going through his head, which is unfortunate because that's enough to drive a man crazy. But we all know. I mean, look at the comebacks that people have had. Look at when Edge, who was plagued with injuries in his career for a certain period of time, when he came back, how much better things were for him. Look when John Cena was gone. He wasn't gone for 9 months, but when he came back. Look, there are Stone Cold Steve Austin. When he came back. There are ways to come back and be even better. We haven't seen that recently because we didn't see it with Finn Balor. We didn't see it with Seth Rollins. Unfortunately, I think we tried with Seth Rollins, but just the timing was off on what was done with Seth Rollins in an effort to make Roman Reigns look a certain way, I think. But I think just because Dean Ambrose just has the ability to have his personality explode so much that you don't have to get explained to what a Dean Ambrose is, that personality just explodes. And 9 months from now, if he runs out to the ring and interrupts a match, I think it's going to be a big deal. And with Seth Rollins, so let's look at what happened with Finn Balor and Seth Rollins. With Finn Balor, it was right before he hit that crescendo, meaning he had only wrestled a couple of times on Raw. He won the Universal title. So it was going to be this thing of we're introducing this character, Finn Balor, as a champion, right? When he gets injured, he's made to look vulnerable. And it's tough when you have not yet proven yourself as Universal Champion. We're ready to see it. I don't think anybody was sitting there going like he's not potential for champion, but he was still potential for champion. Even when he won the title, it was like, okay, I love that they're putting this much behind somebody new. Let's see what he's got. We hadn't seen it yet. Then he gets injured. Then he's out for months. And maybe this curiosity of let's see what he's got kind of goes away. It was just really bad timing for that to happen because Finn Balor hadn't had time to have the audience truly fall in love with him yet. So that's what happened there. In the case of Seth Rollins, it is so clear. Seth Rollins' injury, in terms of storyline, was almost identical to that of Triple H years before. When Triple H went away, he was a bad guy. By the time he came back, there was no other option but to make him a good guy. And they put together all these packages and made him look like a hero and look at how hard he's working and he wants this so badly and blah, blah, blah. And of course he comes back and he's met with, probably to me, I was in the building the night that Triple H came back, and it was probably the biggest response I've ever heard live. Seth Rollins, I was also in the building the night Seth Rollins came back. Now, it was different because it was unannounced. It wasn't advertised. When Triple H came back, it was advertised weeks in advance. And that show, it was like, tonight's the night, tonight's the night, tonight's the night. And then it was saved for the last thing. Seth Rollins came back as a surprise. He got a huge ovation, but he came back as a bad guy. And he had the same stuff. Watch the WWE 24 on Seth Rollins and him recovering from the injury. Seth Rollins will be your favorite wrestler by the time that's done. But when that was put on the network, he was a bad guy on TV. And that affected him. Dean Ambrose is leaving as a good guy. I think that there's very little chance that Dean Ambrose returns in 9 months as a villain. And so the fact that he'll be able to return as a hero, the fact that we've had time to fall in love with this character, means that he will get a hero's welcome. And hopefully it'll be met. Right? And hopefully the character will be able to capitalize on that. And I think that it probably should be able to. Let's get to number 3 while we're talking about the Shield. A move was made on Monday night to deal with the fact that Dean Ambrose would not be a part of WWE for the next 9 months, or at least not be on television. Jason Jordan pleaded and begged his way into a tag title match with Seth Rollins. They won the tag team championships from the bar in a very, very controversial move. I said that I liked it because I enjoy the Strange Bedfellows tag team champions. I liked it when it was Shawn Michaels and Stone Cold Steve Austin. I liked it when it was The Undertaker and The Rock, I think, at one point. I like that thing when you're watching and you're from the Booker T perspective, going like, well, these guys are never going to get along. You listen to him on commentary, and Michael Cole is going, well, Booker, what if they win? And all of us are at home are going, oh, Michael Cole, they're not going to win. And then what happens? 1, 2, 3, they win. And we go, whoa, what happens next? And that's what you want in a show. You want that, whoa. Well, now what happens next? And that's what we're going to find out is what happens next. I also think, and this is another one that I got kind of lambasted on Twitter for. I got called out for shilling. Number one, I'm not shilling for the Christmas thing because I'm speaking from a fan's perspective. If I was shilling, then I probably would find a way to be sympathetic to the superstars without discrediting WWE. That would be shilling. But I'm not... I was surprised that I got the shilling response for Jason Jordan to say that I enjoyed it. Because people were upset that, they thought that Jason Jordan is being shoved down people's throats at the expense of guys like Sheamus and Cesaro. I don't think this was at the expense of Sheamus and Cesaro because in my eyes, and I feel like if it's in my eyes, it's in the eyes of other fans, I don't think Sheamus and Cesaro look worse for this. I don't think this stopped any momentum that Sheamus and Cesaro had. I think that they had a great match, and they're still looked at as one of the top teams in the industry, not just on the Raw brand, in a time when there's a ton of great tag teams. So I don't think it cost them anything. I don't think this was at the expense of anyone, quite frankly. And I think that Jason Jordan's character right now is too interesting for anybody to sit there and say he's getting shoved down our throats, because what they're doing with the Jason Jordan character is so clearly shoving him down our throats that it's not like what happened with Roman Reigns. It's being acknowledged. that Jason Jordan maybe doesn't deserve all the opportunity that he's getting. It's being acknowledged that he's getting matches that normally people wouldn't get, especially since he's losing them. And he's getting opportunity that normally people wouldn't get. It's being pointed out over and over again that he is the son of the general manager who is giving him additional opportunities. He's also going out there and he's not, just making these challenges and being this fearsome competitor. He's whining to get his matches. And I don't think that that's happening by mistake. I don't think that they're trying to create this all-American hero, Jason Jordan, and not realizing that it sounds like he's whining. I think that his character is whining. Now, I don't think it's been officially determined that he's a good guy or he's a bad guy. But I think that this is a long-term character, and the obvious favoritism that Kurt Angle shows for him is going somewhere, and it has gone places. The Jason Jordan character has not been stagnant at all, right? It was in the very beginning. In the very beginning of Jason Jordan being revealed as Kurt Angle's son, it was just Jason Jordan getting the opportunity to have cool matches. And that was fine, I guess, but I, like a lot of you, were sitting there going, okay, but where are we going with this Jason Jordan thing? Now, just because you don't know exactly where the WWE is going with this Jason Jordan thing, doesn't mean that they're not going anywhere. And I don't think you could sit there and tell me that WWE is not going anywhere with Jason Jordan. I don't think, regardless of if you like him or you don't like him, you cannot tell me that Jason Jordan is stagnating. You cannot tell me that there is not momentum one way or the other with this Jason Jordan character. And that's what's important, right? The fact that something is happening here. There is something interesting occurring with this Jason Jordan character. And even in the way that Seth Rollins doesn't really want to team with him. If Jason Jordan were being shoved down our throats, then Seth Rollins, as one of the top good guys in the company, would be sitting there giving him the rub, saying, all right, Jason, all right, kid, let's go do this. But that's not what he's doing, right? It's clear that he doesn't want to be partners with this guy, and that's the story that was told through commentary. So when a story is being told through commentary, that's not done accidentally. That's the story that's being told. And the story that's being told here is one of Jason Jordan not being well-liked. Here's the thing. Last week, or whatever it was, I think it was last week, but it could have been 2 weeks ago, when the Samoa Joe thing was happening. Samoa Joe had a problem with Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns had a problem with Samoa Joe. Jason Jordan wanted a match with Samoa Joe, and neither Samoa Joe nor Roman Reigns wanted to deal with this annoying millennial Jason Jordan. Right? That's the interesting twist here. The idea that he's not on one side or the other. The good guys don't like him. And he's not aligning himself with the bad guys. He's trying to take on all the bad guys and fight for good, but all the good guys are like, get this kid away. He's so annoying. He's the typical little brother. And I'm very interested to see how this plays out, because at this moment, I have a lot of faith that it is going to play out. I believe that Jason Jordan will become a villain. I believe that there will be some kind of tension between he and probably Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle will finally say no to him, and he'll beat him up or something like that. But I think that Jason Jordan is going to be the annoying son of a millionaire. Not that Kurt Angle is a millionaire, but that character where, and I'm not talking about Shane McMahon, but that character where your dad's in charge, so you get things done the way you want, and you throw a tantrum when they don't go the way you want. I think eventually we're going to see Jason Jordan throw a major tantrum. We've seen hints of it already when he suplexes Roman Reigns because he's not getting what he wants. Like, what good guy suplexes Roman Reigns because he's not getting what he wants? That's a little kid throwing a tantrum. So I think that we're going to see some tantrum play from Jason Jordan. And in the meantime, I'm interested in the dynamic of this tag team champion team, because Seth Rollins was obviously happy to win the title, right? Look at the character of Seth Rollins that we watched on Raw. Was happy to be a champion. Now he's got to coexist with Jason Jordan. Is Jason Jordan going to allow Seth Rollins to be the leader of that team? He should, right? Theoretically. Seth Rollins is a former WWE champion. He's a former multi-time tag champion. But Jason Jordan, on the other hand, is the first superstar to ever win the NXT, SmackDown, and Raw tag team championships. And there's nothing in the Jason Jordan character that would lead us to believe that he's going to let anyone else be the leader of any team. So I think that right there is built-in tension and creates an interesting story. And that's why I like things. Like, you know, this isn't a scenario of me being like, oh, Jason Jordan's my favorite, and I'm so glad he's a champion. This is a scenario of me being like, what a great twist in this story. You've now alleviated the concern of Dean Ambrose not being there. You've done something with Seth Rollins that's very interesting, and the Jason Jordan character has taken yet another step forward. And by the way, as we talked about in the Wade Keller conversation, he hasn't died once, Jason Jordan, in the ring. Especially in promos. He has not died. He does not look lost when he's in the ring. Which is half the battle right there. I think it's very, very good. Let's move on to number 4 in the top 5 stories this week here in the state of wrestling. Number 4 is the United States Championship Tournament. Dolph Ziggler forfeits the title. And, you know, I think that I love the promo between Daniel Bryan and Shane McMahon, that weirdness that existed because Daniel Bryan chose to do a tournament. I love tournaments, and already I'm hopeful. Like, I was sitting there watching. I'd love to see some brackets. It's annoying that we didn't see brackets because I love sitting there and figuring out possibilities based on the brackets. I'm assuming it's an 8-man tournament. Could be a 16-man, I guess, but I'm assuming it's an 8-man tournament. If it's a 16-man tournament, number one, I don't know if SmackDown has 16 guys, but if it's a 16-man tournament, then I would imagine the final doesn't happen until the Royal Rumble because, what do you got, 4 weeks or so? Maybe if you only got 3 episodes of SmackDown until the Royal Rumble, then either way, I think you're getting a United States Championship final at the Royal Rumble pay-per-view. You know, it's interesting because I think Bobby Roode versus Jinder Mahal is an interesting final match for the United States Championship because both those guys on either side of the coin, good guy or bad guy, could do a lot with that United States title. But then, you know, there are other guys. I think it's really interesting, and I love that Baron Corbin is eliminated in the first round. Not because I don't like Baron Corbin. I happen to love Baron Corbin. But I don't think he needs a title necessarily. And I think the fact that you've wiped out Baron Corbin in that first round now opens this up to a world of possibilities. We're going to get a United States champion that we have not seen recently. It's also going to be interesting to see what happens with Dolph Ziggler. He's not leaving WWE. You know, he's still under contract. This is a character move. This is not Nick Nemeth putting the title down and walking away from WWE. This is the character Dolph Ziggler walking away. And who knows? Dolph Ziggler could easily pop up in this tournament some way, shape, or form. Stranger things have happened. But I'm going to be interested to see what happens in the tournament. Do Kevin Owens or Sami Zayn make an appearance in this tournament? Maybe. I wouldn't be surprised if they did, because if they do, that's another moment for Shane McMahon to be like, you know, these guys weren't even involved in the United States title picture, and you're showing favoritism, Daniel Bryan. This isn't right. This isn't a right thing at all. At the end of the day, I hope Jinder Mahal wins the U.S. title, because I think that's what should have happened months and months and months ago. So, but I do think they should put brackets out. Like, let's get this conversation going. It's tough for me to have a conversation with you guys about the United States title tournament if we haven't seen brackets. Obviously, AJ Styles won't be in the thing because he's the WWE champion. But, you know, I don't know. It was good to see, even though he lost, it was good to see Ty Dillinger on TV at all. It was good to see him just get a TV match, and the fact that the fans still were chanting 10, 10, 10, 10. They're obviously going to have to break up some teams, not permanently, but just to put them in the tournament, because so much of the SmackDown roster, as we saw in the first hour of SmackDown, right, in the first 2 matches, you had 6 teams. All of which, 7 teams, if you count the Ascension coming out and getting some TV time for themselves. All of which, that's 14 guys right there. And those are 14 of the top guys right now in terms of who's popular. So I'm sure you'll see some of those teams in this tournament. And one of the teams that I would imagine at least one member will be in the tournament is a team that, you know, I take pride in being on the bandwagon early. Rusev Day is becoming the most popular team on the roster. On a roster that has the Usos at their peak and the New Day right now. Rusev Day and Gable and Benjamin doing things that we never thought we would see from that team. Rusev Day has become the most popular. I thought that was amazing, and I don't think it's just a Chicago thing either. And if it is just a Chicago thing, Chicago's love of Rusev Day is going to go beyond Chicago now that it's been on TV, and that is going to permeate throughout the arenas. Rusev Day is now, I mean, one of, if not the most popular teams. So I think in 2018 you are going to see a breakup of the New Day, because you don't need the New Day, the Usos, and Rusev Day on one roster. You just don't need all three teams, especially since all three teams are great in the ring. All three teams are super popular. All three teams are bringing the ha-has. All three teams are entertaining as well as combative. So they're all kind of doing the same thing. You don't need all three. And I think that the New Day are the team that's going to break up, you know. And I think that, you know, Big E is probably going to be the one who's the bad guy of the team, because he's the powerhouse. And I think that that'll break a lot of people's hearts, because Big E is so well loved. But that's what you want to do as a bad guy. You want to break some people's hearts. I am so happy, and I'm so happy. You know, I was calling them Rusev Day for the last several weeks. I think I went on the kickoff show and called them Rusev Day. And it's officially, and I'm not taking credit for it, I'm just saying that I think there were a lot of us that were doing that. It's official that I believe they as a team multiple times on SmackDown this week were called Rusev Day. So that's super cool. I'm super happy for both those guys. I didn't think that it was possible, and I think most of us probably didn't think it was possible. But yeah, Rusev Day, one of, if not the most popular teams on SmackDown right now, and that's how we go into 2018. A lot of potential, folks. A lot of potential. If you thought I missed anything, I didn't talk about the Daniel Bryan, Shane McMahon story too much because I thought that was last week's story. Of course, you know, the Brian Kendrick injury, that would have been number 6, and we hope for a speedy recovery. But if you want to be involved, leave comments on my Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter, and you can help me determine what the top 5 stories are each week here in the state of wrestling. Until next week, I'll be seeing you, I guess. Is that how you end a show? Well, that's how we're ending a show.
Thanks for listening. Follow at Not Sam on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And subscribe for free to listen every week to Sam Roberts' Wrestling Podcast.